Yep, absolutely. We've had apologies from Councillor Austin White, and then Councillor Marshall and Councillor Levery, your apologies for the afternoon session. That's everything.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Gareth. I think there's a problem with your microphone, so we'll just swap it out for one that's not making this sound.
Feedback.
My colleague tells me there's not sound on the webcam.
Okay, thank you. There we go. I can hear myself. Okay, I'm going to move us straight on to the appointment of the chair and vice chair for the committee. So I understand Councillor Philip Loss has confirmed that he's happy to continue as chair of the committee, and no other members have put themselves forward for the position. So just for clarity, would anyone else like to put themselves forward at this point? Okay, I'll take that as a no, and therefore Councillor Lofts is appointed as chair of the committee for 24 and 25. The vice chair of the committee must be an independent member, and Dave Phillips has put himself forward for this position. Is the committee happy to approve this? Good. Dave Phillips is therefore appointed as vice chair of the committee for the new financial year. The webcast will now be paused briefly, and I'll hand over to the new chair. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much, and thank you for re-nominating and electing me. I think it's a thank you. We'll find out as we progress. I'll start by saying that I've forgotten my laptop this morning, which is about the worst thing a chair can do, but I've got a huge pack of papers which I can refer to if I need to. So, appointments, the next item 3, appointments to the Transport Risk Working Group, and that would be Paul Schofield, unless anybody else wants a lot more work. I don't see any hands. I think you've got it, Paul. Welcome again. Are there any urgent items or announcements? None. Thank you. Items to be considered in the absence of public and press. Are there any?
Agenda item 17 is a restricted item, I believe, and we'll pause the webcast at that point.
We'll pause at that point. Thank you. Declarations, pecuniary or otherwise, by members. Are there any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests to be declared? No. Thank you. Reports from and questions by members. Nope. Questions from members of the public. Nil. Getting through this, aren't we? Minutes and actions of the previous meeting held on the 20th of March. I assume people have read them. Are they a correct record? I take that as a yes, thank you. And are there any questions on them? Yes.
We weren't quorate in the afternoon, Chair, so I think there are a couple of items we will need to ideally formally approve at this point with the committee. Now we are quorate to the Treasury Management Strategy and I think the Internal Audit Plan. So I'll take some advice on this from officers as necessary, but can we just formally record them as approved now? Is that okay? Yes, I'm getting a nod. So
Yeah.
can the committee formally approve those two items, please?
Okay, formally done. Oh. Even when it's working, we forget to use it. Yeah, thank you. Health and safety update, Sean Rogers.
Yeah, good morning. For the reporting period, 1st of January to the 31st of March, we can report that there were no accidents on the interchanges and one near miss to report. The near miss was in February. There was an arson attack at Sheffield interchange. The individual was apprehended, police took him away, and South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue managed to put the fire out. Just like to say the guys at the interchange dealt with the initial fire well and managed to subside it and put it out. It turned out that the individual had taken light to a toilet roll holder in one of the toilets, and it was smouldering rather than a fire. So that's all been corrected. There's been a decrease in the number of incidents from the last quarter. This is due to how the figures have been reported currently at a request from South Yorkshire Police. So they've changed the pieces that we want from us. So it's showing a slight decrease. That'll all even out over the year. So it's fine. Riddors, there has been less than the last period, there was 3 riddors reported to the HSE from ourselves during this period. This is due to ambulances being called as a precaution by staff for members of the public which have been injured. They included twisted knees, a sprained ankle and a lady falling while pushing a shopping trolley. I'd just like to say that we didn't contribute to or cause any of these incidents. They were just general accidents. In terms of the transport operator accidents, there have been 2 riddors to report from Supertramp side of things. They've been dealt with and sorted out. Staff accidents, there were also 2 staff accidents during this reporting period, both non-reportable and no lost time for either of them. Premises audits, have been carrying out premises audits around the areas. There's been no concerns raised and found nothing of any detriment to cause us concern. Fire risk assessments, we continue to monitor the status of the actions within them fire risk assessments from the findings on all sites. Of the actions identified, the majority have either been actioned or have got actions raised, ready to be closed off. Emergency evacuation plans. The previous health and safety advisor had redrafted the emergency evacuation plans for all interchanges with the anticipation of the rollout of the signing in system. That's still not happened and it's being chased. We're waiting for IT to get that done. That got chased again last week. Training, health and safety training. We are currently looking at training providers for that and looking at what mandatory training courses are required throughout the organisation, so we can update later on with that one once we know the new platform has been introduced or at least been identified. Safety and compliance, which sits with the DSE, the office equipment assessments. That gets done for every new starter and I continue to monitor that, and there's been a number of in-person checks this reporting period where I've been and sat with people and identified issues that they may be having. Just like to also say we're looking at a new management system for health and safety. We've had a couple of demos with that, and we're looking at purchasing something that will help us identify trends and accidents better. We're hoping to have that running by the end of this financial calendar year. Do you want to add up with that one? No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions to the report? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask Sean a couple of questions on the near miss? Do we understand why the scan never picked up the cables? Was it because they weren't live at the time?
Yeah, they weren't live. They were dead and they were encased in concrete. So the existing ones had been buried in concrete and they just not picked them up. But they were dead.
And so was there any real risk there to life?
Yes and no, because the really good workmanship, they should have done a CAT scan to pre-identify them, and that appears not to have picked it up.
Do we understand why the CAT scan didn't pick
Due to the concrete and other interference, potentially from cables, from reinforcing rebar within the concrete, it could have deflected them images.
And is there any other thing that we could do to prevent that happening again?
Other than I've pre-identified plans as to where these cables are, as laid drawings they call them, and I think it was that old to just not being there. I think going forward we would insist on as laid drawings to know cables, the location of them, and these days good practice is to tape them, to sand them and identify them before we get to that stage. I think because the age of the cables has just been missed.
Right, so that's the learning thing that we
It
take
is,
out
yeah.
of this one, and that's what we're going to do going forward.
Yeah.
Right, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Similar series of questions really on the tram going through the junction at Hackenthorpe due to signalling issues. Again, obviously, if a tram goes through and crunches into somebody and kills them, or there's an accident that's front page of the Star. What do we do to try and avoid this happening again?
That you're going to have to help me with, because I weren't here.
So for the trams, obviously there's been a reissue of the training of the correct processes and protocols that should be followed, especially when it comes to faulty signalling. So that has all, I have the belief that has all now been re-delivered, and things are being closely monitored. Obviously the drivers also included are being closely monitored that were involved.
Yeah, I can see it's a toughie because it's human error, and
Yeah.
sort of how do you stop people making mistakes? I mean, is there some sort of audible alarm, or is that just too expensive, or there's no other way of... Whenever you've got a human error in a system that's operated every day by hundreds of people, the worry is that you will have human error at some stage. And
I do believe that the health and safety team that work obviously with the tram are actually looking into that.
Thank you.
If I could just add, because the reporting period casts back to Q4 of the prior year, this is an incident that took place under the auspices of Stagecoach. Since that point, the tram system's obviously come back under public control, and we have spent quite a bit of time with the new management team working through health and safety issues. And one of the things we are looking at is in particular issues about how we communicate with drivers in the carriages. It's one of the things that got raised that we were picking up on. So if it would help the committee, we could bring a report back at some point about the progress that we've made around health and safety and the new company.
Yeah, I think that would be useful.
We'll add that onto the next report.
Clearly it's a different, on my own. Yeah, clearly it's a different regime, so we ought to have an update report on that. Thank you. Anything further? No. Right, at this point I'll go back to item 4, where I forgot to extend a welcome to Steve Ragg, who is a non-voting member as chair of the Joint Independent Audit Committee, JIAC, for the Police Authority. Correct me if I'm wrong at any stage, Steve.
I chair the Joint Independent Audit Committee that was for the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner and now has been subsumed into SIMCA and for South Yorkshire Police.
Very succinct. Thank you very much. So welcome, Steve. And also, of course, I'll extend my welcome to Councillor Every and to Councillor Marshall, who I met earlier. Thank you and welcome. Okay, so item 11 is terms of the review. Is the committee content with the terms of reference as they are, or would anybody like to suggest any changes? Yes?
The only suggestion I'd make for the Transport and Risk Working Group, which is I think Appendix B on it, is in terms of quorum and attendance, do we need to add a line, Claire, that says in the event that it's not quorate, it can still hear reports from officers? Because obviously we report back to this main group anyway, just for the avoidance of doubt.
And then this group would effectively sign them off.
Absolutely, which it does anyway. Because unless this group were to delegate something to the group, like it did over the crossing up at Darno, it doesn't take any decisions as such.
Okay. Yes?
Could I also just ask as well, I think we skipped over in the appointments section, but the terms of reference for the Transport Risk Working Group, it also requires 2 elected members. So we need some volunteers to join Paul on that risk working group, and just to inform new members that meeting just takes place virtually. It doesn't require coming into Broad Street West for a formal meeting. It's just a virtual meeting that takes place a couple of days before the committee meeting, and the papers are circulated the week before. So it's not too onerous, doesn't take a lot of time, but it is a really valuable meeting to be part of. So just looking for volunteers to join that. It was Councillor White, who's not with us today, and it was Ian Auckland, but obviously Councillor Auckland's retired now, so we're looking for
and they did a sterling job. Volunteers? Yes? Volunteers? I'm sure Austin White would be pleased if you don't want to.
Go on, yeah.
Yeah?
Volunteer.
Okay, you've got
Thank you very much. Welcome.
2 press men short with.
In addition, we discussed on Monday as well the current terms of reference says that we'll look at the medium, high and high risk at directorate level in the transport area, but not specifically providing updates on the corporate level risks that are transport, and there are 4 at that level at the moment. So I think if we just tweak the terms of reference to make sure that you're getting the updates on those particular risks as well.
Yeah, that would be fine, thank you.
We did have a discussion.
Will those come into the report that we mentioned
They're
earlier?
in the dashboard report for the main
okay.
committee, but just to make sure that they get that sufficient oversight, we thought we'd just propose tweaking that as well.
I'm sure Paul will keep an eye on that.
Yeah, is that okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Update on the external audit of 22-23 accounts.
Hassan's on screen.
Hassan,
Yeah,
you
thank
elude
you.
me constantly. Hello, Hassan.
Thank you. Hello there. Thank you, Chair. So in terms of 22-23, I think members maybe recall from previous updates that I've provided at the committee in terms of the strategy that we're following as a firm in terms of 22-23. So looking to make sure, as part of the reset of local government accounts, making sure that we're focusing our work on pension fund audits, on our VFM reporting responsibilities where relevant on the 23-24 accounts. In relation to our work on value for money for 22-23, so that work has been completed. There are no significant weaknesses that we've identified as a result of that work that we need to report on by exception. The report is currently with me for review, so we look to get that out for officers' comments by the end of the month. Apologies that it's not hasn't been completed in time for this meeting, but as I said, we'll look to get that out to officers by the end of the month. And in relation to the 22-23 accounts, then the anticipated position on that is, as previously communicated, it will be disclaimed opinion. At this point in time, the sector is still waiting to receive guidance from system leaders in terms of the next steps as part of the reset of the local government audit market. The general election did cause a delay in terms of, or has caused kind of a delay in terms of that guidance coming out. So we're waiting for system leaders to provide that update to the sector. Happy to take any questions if there are any questions.
Thanks for that update. Can I just push you as to straws in the wind on when you think the timetable might be? I'm hearing that dates are being mooted as Christmas or March next year for the new dates. Do you have anything at all to tell us, and anything at all on if you're issuing a disclaimer? Can you still do it by September, or will it have to be later? Obviously, the sooner we draw a line under 2023, the sooner we can all move on, I think. So it'd be good to get your indications of where you think you are.
In terms of timelines, hearing similar mutings to what you've just outlined, but that's nothing official. We're waiting for, as I said, waiting for guidance from the sector. Previously, before the calling of the general election, we were hearing that there would have been a ministerial announcement by the end of May, which would have then allowed for the legislative process to take effect, which would have then been working towards the September date. In order for the for the disclaimed opinion, we still need that the parliamentary process to have taken effect. So it's it's not looking likely that it will be by the end of September. If there's anything in terms of the Parliament, I'm not an expert in terms of parliamentary processes, but if there's anything that they can do to expedite it, then that'd be an issue for the civil service, well, for the ministers and the department to look at. So I expect it's probably going to be later than September, but as I said, waiting as is everybody within the sector for the guidance to come out.
Thanks for that. And if they, I mean, from memory, I don't know, with an election, Parliament normally rises before the end of July and doesn't come back until early October. But if they do come back and pull their fingers out and get something through in October, how long will it take you to disclaim from then, do you think?
It's we'll be looking to see what exactly is contained, and then we'll be looking to try to disclaim, as we were in a position of terms of working towards the September September timetable that was previously outlined. So our intention is to try to do it as quickly as we can, but it's difficult to give exact timings on that without knowing any of the detail that may kind of come out from the guidance. But where our intention is to try to do it as to meet the timetables that are communicated as part of that guidance.
Okay, the reason I'm pushing is that obviously it cues the next year's audit back behind that, and we'll have external auditors trying to put things in their plans, and we'll have officers trying to work out when they need to be available to assist with all these things. So as much certainty as possible, and I appreciate if you don't exactly know when the dates are,
Yeah.
you can't tell us, but it's anything. Well, there's two things. Can you undertake to let people know as soon as possible, both on the external audit side and officer side, when you do it? And I'll come back to, presumably you can pre-plan most of the work, given that you're issuing a disclaimer on the accounts. It's a matter of saying we're not doing any work. This is a wording of an opinion. From the outside, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of work once you get a date through legislation. Are we talking about 3 or 4 weeks, or 2 weeks, or 2 months? Can you give us anything more than sort of as quickly as possible, which is difficult to plan through?
Yeah. Once the details are communicated, then we will outline what that means in terms of timetables. Then without that detail, it's just kind of like just really speculating. Together with we're in a similar position in terms of where we're taking on audits in terms of the 23-24 accounts, so kind of aware of what the position means for both incoming and outgoing auditors. As I said, just looking what once the details are announced, we're looking to try to undertake our processes to meet those timetables that are communicated. I apologise, can't be any more specific than that, because we are waiting for for the guidance from the system leaders to come out.
Oh, okay. So I'll just try once more. If we made a planning assumption that the guidance says you don't have to do any work on the accounts, you've already helpfully told us you've done the VFM. You don't have to do any work on the accounts. You just have to issue a form of words. Is that something you'll be able to do in weeks, days, or several months? Could you give us any indication of what that would be?
So in terms of looking to, and it does depend in terms of what the what the legislation says in terms of how how it's going to be enacted. So previously we were working towards the September timetable. So there'll be a number of audits that's got to go through the disclaimed process. So we were looking to a position in terms of getting waiting for the legislative program and waiting for the guidance to come. We're expecting the guidance to have come out within the earlier part of the summer, June, July, and then moving forward to getting everything done by September, assuming in terms of the as I said, the parliamentary process that then happens. So once there's announcements being made in terms of these are the decisions that are going to be made, this is the timetable that it's going to take in terms of the parliamentary process. Our expectations then was that following on from that announcement, that system leaders, so the FRC department, DLUC as they were then, would have then started issuing guidance to the system in terms of procedures that they need to undertake. I think that would also include the form of the wording of the opinion, guidance on opening balances, etc. And so in parallel with the legislative timetable, we're then getting our processes in place to meet that timetable. So if the and it's kind of, as I said, I'm kind of speculating in terms of when this guidance is going to come out, but if the whole process then shifts by 2 or 3 months, then that same timetable then starts shifting, because it's difficult to start responding to what might be contained within guidance or within legislation until you've actually seen it. So it really is speculating until we've actually seen the detail.
I appreciate, thank you for that, and I appreciate that until you've seen the guidance you don't know exactly what you've got to do. But I'm assuming that you will have some planning assumptions within your staff timetabling for the next 6 months, because all firms plan their staff out to periods ahead. You must be saying to yourselves, right, that we've had these difficulties now, everything's shifted backwards, however we think we will need people to do this work in October or in November or in December. I appreciate that might change if the new guidance comes out and actually requires you to do 15 procedures and you're expecting to do none. But with a planning assumption, you're basically required to do nothing other than write a paragraph that says we haven't done anything. Can we try and pin you that? When are you planning to then do this work for, please?
So we initially had a team kind of centrally aligned to undertake the work during August and September in order to get through the disclaimed process. It's not just going to be a case of, so it might, although it's a disclaimed opinion, there'll still be certain procedures that you need to undertake in order to get to that position. So we initially had the teams set up in order to do that between August and September in order to meet that particular timetable. And now what we're in a position where we haven't yet, so we're waiting for those system leaders to provide the guidance, to start the starting gun in order then to be able to be in a position to then say, what do we need to shift and lift across to to do the processes which we anticipated. I kind of appreciate it's it's kind of a you're trying to push me on a date and a timetable, but I'm really speaking in the I'm trying to speak in the absence of any guidance centrally. So just need to wait to see what that says, and then be able, and then once I'm in an informed position, be able to then come back to you and say, this is how we're looking to take it forward. What we're looking to try to do is to try and do it as quickly as possible, because we want to be in a position where we're moving on to current year audits, which is what we're looking to do in a number of cases where we're, as I outlined previously, we're looking to prioritise our work on some of the 23-24 audits, as well as the pension fund audits and the VFM work that we've been doing.
Okay, Hassan, I think we've gone through this as much as possible. So you'll let us know as soon as you can when you get a definitive.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I turned that off because Dave kept coming up as Philip Lofts. That didn't take time. Any further questions to Hassan, which might or might not be productive? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Hassan. We look forward to
Thank you, Chair.
a date, as we often have. Thank you very much. External accounts indicative plan. I'm sure this will be better.
Thanks, Chair. As the primary author of the report, I'll let Molly do the honours of presenting it. Obviously, I'll be happy to take any questions at the end of the presentation. I suppose in order to close down that last item with regards to how that will impact our 23-24 external audit, I sympathise with the position in terms of a lack of clarity of guidance timetable from our point of view, where we have certainty that a disclaimed audit opinion will be signed, which is the case. We have had sign off from our risk and compliance department, which basically states that we should just control what we can control. We will progress with our external audit for the 23-24 balances, where we will not complete procedures until guidance is received, is over things that rely on opening positions. So we're talking the reserves. There'll be specific procedures we'll have to do over opening reserves. There may be some things we have to do if we're doing any, I suppose, substantive analytical procedures where we're trying to predict what balances should be at 23-24. However, the anticipation is we treat all balances as in-year balances, and that should allow us actually to complete quite a lot, if not the majority, of testing within a pre-arranged timetable. And I think you'll remember at the prior meeting, we had set ourselves our own internal deadline of the end of the calendar year to complete this audit, to allow us to try to get back on schedule in terms of a normal planning and finalisation procedure for 24-25. obviously subject to the guidance being released in terms of if everything changes and it turns out that substantially more work over open and balances is required, that will add to the workload. But obviously we'll come back as soon as we know and let you know in a finalised audit plan what the approach to the open and balances will be. But rest assured, our work is scheduled to commence in August. We'll be working through that in August, September and the beginning of October, and hope to get it as much finalised as quickly as possible to be able to bring a really good update to the next meeting.
Right, are there any?
Sorry, I think
Oh, I'm happy to take any questions on that part, but then Molly can do the plan.
We'll do that. Any questions to James on that? No? Okay. Molly.
Thank you. So I'll just take you through some of the key points in our indicative audit plan, but we'll take the majority as read. So page 47 of the pack, or page 3 of our report, just outlines our materiality levels based on our planning procedures. So it's currently set at 9 million, which is around 2.5% of forecast expenditure. And our reporting threshold is £450,000. So if we identify any errors over £450,000, they will be reported in our year-end report to the Audit Committee. Moving on to page 4, we've just outlined here any planned involvement of any specialists that we intend to use. So we've got the expertise of our Real Estate Valuation Centre of Excellence involved in the process in relation to the valuation of your land and buildings, and then our Pension Centre of Excellence in relation to the year-end pensions balance. So all of their outputs, again, will be reported within our year-end report. Page 5 then just outlines our significant risks and other audit risks identified. So there's further detail on the following pages, but just to outline those, we've got the significant risk over the valuation of land and buildings, and as I say, will involve our specialist to review the assumptions that go into that valuation. We've then got the required risk of management override of controls through professional standards. So that will mainly revolve around looking at the journal entries posted throughout the year and any kind of those that are deemed high risk as a result of our risk assessment procedures. We've then identified 3 other audit risks in relation to things that are ongoing in this particular financial year. So we've got the valuation of pension liabilities, given the value of that compared to the rest of the financial statements, that's been identified as another audit risk as opposed to a significant risk this year, but that is subject to change based on actuals. We've then got the other audit risk of the integration of the PTE, so we'll be reviewing the integration and the merger accounting used as part of the financial reporting process. And then finally, the reclassification of infrastructure assets in the year will ensure that they've been brought into the balance sheet in line with the accounting treatments proposed. Page 11 then just outlines those significant risks that are presumed significant risks based on financial reporting standards that we have deemed to rebut during the year based on the nature of both expenditure and revenue and the lack of kind of any incentive to manipulate the position at the year end. Pages 13 and 14 then just have our mandatory communications that we're required to report to the Audit Committee. And pages 16 and 17 just give a high-level overview of our approach that we will be taking to the value for money risk assessment this year. You will note that there's no detailed commentary included in the audit plan at the moment. Our work is still ongoing with regards to that, but we do have management self-assessment through now, so that's what we'll be working on over the next few weeks to then bring back our full audit plan and value for money risk assessment commentary to the next audit committee in September. And then finally, page 22 just outlines our confirmation of independence, and there's nothing that we need to flag to the committee at the moment. Other than that, happy to take any questions on the plan.
Thank you very much. All right.
Just a couple. On your page 21, our page 65, you set down the fees there. There's a TBC for some additional work where the fee hasn't been set yet. I mean, obvious question, any idea how much that's going to be? And the other question is, can you remind us what the fee levels were last year? Is this a year where the fees have whipped up by about 120% compared to last year? But I'd just like reminding of that, please.
Yeah, sure. So the TBC fee relates to the introduction of two new auditing standards, ISA 315 and ISA 240. ISA 240 is auditor's response to fraud, and ISA 315 is additional work that's required to be done around planning and risk assessment. At the time of the PSA tender process, it was written in that all bodies should be expecting an additional fee with regard to this, because at the time no one was aware of how much extra work would be done. The estimation is that it becomes between 5 and 10% of the audit fee in terms of effort. I would, at this stage now that we're coming towards the end of our planning and risk assessment work, I would say that's probably more at the 5% end of the scale, on the basis that 10% would be around where we're relying on automated controls, where we've got a bigger controls reliance. We've had to do a lot more work in terms of understanding the balances, understanding the processes, doing the walkthroughs, and IT understanding to get to that point of view. So I think I would say, well, I'll say it's 5%. Well, at this stage, and put my cards on the table from that point of view, we can sign up to that. In terms of the audit fees for 23-24, yes, you are correct. This is the first year of the new PSA 5 years plus 2 contract. So you will have seen, I mean, what we haven't done is done a comparator, because they weren't our fees from last year, so you will be able to see that within the predecessor auditor's report. But it is a significant increase year on year. I think obviously management haven't been involved in the setting of that fee. It was a centralised procurement process. It was done centrally with KPMG and other firms. I think it recognises that during the last round of negotiations that potentially there was a bit of a race to the bottom in terms of how cheaply can we do it to secure the work, rather than how much does it actually cost to deliver a quality audit. I think potentially some of the fees and the fee levels over the past number of years have added to the problem of the backlog, whereby a prioritisation of work has gone to work that's more profitable and can be done in line with commercial requirements. So I think actually this is probably more representative of the true cost of the audit, and if you compare it across sectors, you'll see that, for instance, in the health sector, you'll see fees more aligned to this one, rather than the sort of £20,000-30,000 that you will have seen over the past five to 7 years.
Okay, thank you. I'll say ouch in terms of the fees, but in some ways they're getting back to the fees we had 10, 12 years ago. I don't know whether, I don't think there's anything we can do about them as their scale fees, so it's just an unprofitable discussion. But thank you for that information.
I will say it's useful to hear an auditor committing themselves. Thank you for that. Comfortable or not. Yes, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Molly, just going back to the diagram on page 49 of the pack, the risks. If I've understood the diagram correctly, the biggest risk you see is in the use of the merger accounting formula. Is that right? Number 4, that's the one that's furthest over the right-hand side, biggest risk of material misstatement.
Yeah, so it's got the highest likelihood of misstatement. So if you look, the highest potential impact on the accounts is number 2, but it's got the lowest likelihood, which is associated with fraud in terms of management doing fraudulent activities to manipulate the financial statement. So that would have the highest impact, but the lowest likelihood. The highest likelihood is to do with the merger accounting, on the basis that it's unusual, it doesn't happen every day, and therefore management might not be used in terms of what the accounting standards are, what the principles are, and what the implications are for that. So it's probably got the highest highest likelihood of risk, but not the highest impact on the financial statements if it did go wrong.
And what previous experience or evidence of this leads you to conclude that that would be the highest likelihood?
So I suppose I would start off by saying we always debate with regards to this graph whether to include it or not, because it's quite judgmental and can raise these types of questions in terms of where we get to. So it's not an exact science, I'll say. So I suppose in terms of how we've arrived at that decision is on that fact that it's not something that happens within local government accounts every year. It's something that people might go their whole careers without ever having to do. The accounting, there are different decisions that can be made in terms of how you account for a merger within the auditing standards. Therefore, decisions have to be made that are in line with the accounting standards. If we disagree with the approach taken, it could cause an issue. Therefore, it could be that you might have some organisations who just haven't read the guidance, haven't read the standards, and just do it the way that they think is the most appropriate, but turns out that that is completely at odds with accounting standards, which could therefore increase the likelihood of that going wrong. But when we're talking about the values involved, we're saying that it wouldn't have the greatest impact materiality-wise on the financial statements. That would be things around management override of controls.
Okay, thanks very much indeed for that, James. So what I take from that is that I feel like is a sort of standard starting point because of the inherent risk in what you're doing. It's not, and don't wish to commit you to anything here, I'll put words in your mouth, but it's not something you've seen in the accounts already or what you know of what we've done that suggests, I'm surprised they've used merger accounting.
Oh, no.
Fine. That's fine.
In a way, actually, we try to take a no surprises approach, and I'm pleased to say that management have been very engaged in that process. We've had a lot of early discussions with management about which approach to take. So we haven't actually looked at the financial statements yet, given this is the plan. So what we're saying is it's a bit of an unusual transaction. Therefore, we want to draw your attention to it as those charged with governance that an unusual transaction is there. Therefore, it is an increased risk, and therefore we will be placing specific focus on that as part of our audit procedures.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
If I could just add, Chair, we've got the item this afternoon on the 23-24 accounts, so it might be appropriate at that point for Simon, who will be joining us, our interim chief accountant. He can touch on particular note 8, critical judgments, which goes into more detail exactly about this particular point of merger accounting.
Right, if the committee is content with that, we'll move on. Thank you very much, James. To item 14, which is the internal audit annual report.
Thank you, Chair. So our first report is our annual report for 23-24, which includes our Head of Internal Audit opinion. And as you can see on page 78 of the pack, our Head of Internal Audit opinion for the year is the organisation has adequate and effective framework in place for risk management, governance and internal control. However, our work's identified further enhancements. So in order to formulate that opinion, we look at the governance, internal control and risk aspects of internal audit performed in 23-24. We did specific reviews on governance and risk management in 23-24. Both were positive opinions. And we undertook 8 assurance reviews last year, of which 2 came out with substantial assurance. 5 came out with reasonable and 1 came out as partial, all of which have been presented, and we've got 2 more which are later on in the agenda. On page 3 and 4 of our report, on page 79 and 80 of the pack, you've got a summary of each of those audits and the key actions that came out of those. We also consider the follow-up when we're looking at our opinion, so we did 2 follow-ups for 23-24. Both came out with reasonable progress, which on the positive side. And further on in our annual report, you have our performance for the year and also conflicts of interest section. Not to pull out that there were any conflicts, but we have, for transparency, just recorded the 2 other services provided for the organisation, which were the risk management software and then the grant audit in 23-24. And the last section of our report is our key performance indicators in line with the contract. And as you can see in there, pleased to note kind of they're all met. The one area to look at for next year is getting management responses back within 10 working days. There was a couple of audits due to leave and things at Christmas that kind of delayed that a little bit last year. But if you note that the next item in our progress report for 24-25, that's already coming in underneath that KPI for management. So that's a positive start for next year. And that's just a summary really of our annual report and internal audit opinion for the year, and I'm happy to take any questions that committee may have.
I've just got one. Thanks for that, Anna. Page 82, you've got a graph showing implementation of agreed actions and follow-up by status. Under the medium ones, there's a grey bar which looks to be around about 3 recommendations which are not implemented. What's happened there? Why have they not been implemented?
We have the full follow-up report kind of on the next agenda item. Is it okay we pick it up there? Because we'll be presenting those there. Is that okay? Thank you.
Just to follow up on all this, we're really grateful for this report. I think it's a fair reflection of where we're up to as an organisation that's gone through a significant amount of change in the last couple of years and has more challenges ahead. Just on a personal level, grateful for the work from RSM colleagues. I think it's really moved on from where we were a year or so ago with our internal audit partner. There's a lot more discipline and rigour within the process that we're feeling, and it's making the journey smoother for us. And RSM colleagues are engaging with our exec leadership board in a way that we haven't done previously, which has helped to put a lot more senior management focus on the audits and importantly the actions and the follow-on. So just I guess grateful to RSM colleagues for all the work that they've put in over the last year.
Yeah, that's very good, thank you. Should we move on to the next report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the next report is our progress report. This summarises the internal audit work performed since the last audit committee. So we have 2 reports which have been finalised, which finish off the 23-24 internal audit plan. That's follow-up and governance, which are kind of later on in the agenda. And also we have our bus tender services first final report for 24-25 later on in the agenda. Just kind of pull out key messages. We have got all the remaining internal audits. I say remaining, it's quite a lot for 24-25 to go, but we've got all the internal audits scheduled and all the planning meetings in the diary as well for those. So we're comfortable with it. We'll work through those as the year progresses. In the appendices, it is a bit of a joint one this time, so it summarises all of the reports 23-24 and then it details where we are with the audits for 24-25. Some of those are kind of ongoing at the moment. We've got a fraud in skills advisory review that's just concluding and our follow-up, and we've got IT asset management commencing this week. And then we've just got our usual any other matters and key performance indicators, but nothing that I think I need to draw committee's attention to really. So I'm happy to take any questions on the progress report.
So, are there any questions? Nope. Okay, item 16.
Thank you. This will be the last one for me, then I'll hand over to Aaron, so you've got a different voice. So the next report is our governance report. So here we looked at the new cabinet style model to look at whether there's changes, whether the new roles have been communicated, understood, how they've been embedded. And overall you can see it came out with substantial assurance. On page 107 of the pack you'll see all the controls which we found which were well designed and operating effectively. There was just one area for improvement identified in regards to implementing a more formal lessons learned approach. So what we found was obviously one of the areas to undertake the lessons learned was the completion of this review, and we've got some other suggestions from the interviews we undertook in there in terms of the detailed testing, but it was just to have an action going forward for any kind of major change, that there's kind of a formalised lessons learned approach undertaken kind of proportionate to the change programme. But overall a positive report, and I'm happy to take any questions that committee may have.
Claire?
Yeah, just to say on that action, just to give you a little bit of progress update. So I've drafted a guide to kind of lessons learned for in line with the recommendation, based around best practice, and that the next steps with that are for Gareth and I just to sit down and look at how we might operationalise that and make sure that the approach is proportionate. So that action's already been progressed.
Okay. Anything further? No. Thank you very much for that report. Those reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the next two reports. I was just going to propose, is it okay to take the follow-up report before the bus tendered services, just on the basis that that closes last year rather than starting on this year's report, if that's okay with you? Yeah. So, so as previously mentioned as part of the opinion for the year, and obviously David asked this question as well, so this is where we conduct two follow-ups in a year, where at the time of the audit we take any actions that are due for implementation based on the dates that we've agreed in the reports, and we go to seek confirmation from management on the status. So there's a few statuses that we can have, which is implementation ongoing, which is where some action has been taken but it's not fully signed off, not implemented where there's no progress at the time of the audit, and then also superseded if it's no longer relevant. So in this second review we had 32 actions that we were following up, of which 24 had either been completed or superseded, which is obviously positive to see because they're no longer now on the log, shall we say, because they're implemented. And there was 8 that remained open, with 7 ongoing and 1 not implemented. So overall we provided reasonable progress, which is a positive opinion. It's just important to note as well, obviously this was a status at the time of the audit, which was around March time, I believe. But since then we've had an update from management that the action in here, which was deemed not implemented, has now been implemented. That was just done as part of the year-end accounts processes. So obviously, when we come to do our next follow-up, that will be closed off as part of that, and we'll report that back. And obviously I won't give any information on the cyber actions because that's in a separate paper in the closed session. But I'll take any questions on progress at this stage.
Dave.
Sorry, just one. So on page 139, where you're showing 1 not implemented, you're saying that's now been implemented anyway. And my other question was going back to page 82, that bar chart on 82 is more than 1. Is that because the other ones are cyber then, or?
So those other 2 came from the previous follow-up audit that we did. So this was second follow-up. That's the first, but those have now gone onto the tracker. So I can find the detail of which 2 they were, but there's a high chance that they're probably in here that have now been implemented in the second follow-up. So what they do is they just go back into the log with a new implementation date, and then we re-follow them up.
So if we're saying that, what we're saying is all 3 of the ones that were not implemented at all are now implemented, that's fine.
I can double check and make sure, but based on the dates and the timings, the chances are that if they were followed up and not implemented, then the new date would have fell within this period. But I can double check after and get that.
Thank you.
Nothing further? Accept the report. Thank you very much. I think at this point we pause the... Oh, okay.
I was going to say we've got one more. You can't get rid of us
on.
yet. So the last report from us today is the bus tendered services review. So this is the first audit of the 24-25 year. I think it's probably worth just noting initially as well that you may see that the design of the report looks slightly different. So as of the new year, we've gone for a bit of a rebrand. So our reports just look slightly different, with some glossy pictures here and there, and some more bits highlighted and shaded and things like that. But it's just important to note that the way we've done it is based on the fact of trying to make it concise and pull out the key points and give committee members what they need, as opposed to giving everything, shall we say, that goes on for pages and pages. So hopefully you appreciate the new look. I'm sure it took a lot of time and effort to pull together, but if there is any comments, of course, please let us know. So from this review, this was looking at the bus tendered services process, which hopefully members are aware is where operators deem that a route is no longer financially viable or commercially beneficial, shall we say, to them. obviously the MCA can step in and still run that route so that it doesn't have the major disruption to the network. But obviously that comes as part of a tender process and obviously supporting with the costs and the running of it. So overall from this review we provided reasonable assurance, which of course a positive opinion, with 4 medium and 2 low management actions agreed. And as you can see from the table on page 5 and 6 of our pack, this is where we've set them out as all the actions, the priorities and the dates agreed with management. And I think just touching on the medium priority actions, as you can see we've now separated them into certain themes as part of the new process, which the first theme was around sort of policies, procedures and then sort of documentation and retention of documents, shall we say. And 3 of the mediums fell into there, which included making sure there's actually documented procedures for the day-to-day activities for people to follow for bus tendered services, just ensuring there's that supporting documentation or rationale, shall we say, behind some of the decisions as to why they've been tendered and the fact that it is needed so it doesn't disrupt the network, shall we say, and just having that backing there. And then also around making sure that the signed contracts are in place from the start of the contract as opposed to part way through. And then finally there was a data quality point just on the contract register. There was aspects in there that weren't quite accurate matching to the contract in terms of dates, values and things like that, but that was more of a data quality point, shall we say. But also I think it's probably key to note, and I can see Tim's now on the screen, so I'm assuming he's he's here for this reason as well, but there was a change in the team actually in the last few months, so some of these processes are due to be updated as part of that anyway, and it's things that they've identified, shall we say, as part of coming in and actually being put in place or looking to improve, shall we say. And of course all of this could change at some point depending on bus franchising, if that happens at some stage, and how that affects. But I think overall a positive report, but happy to take any questions.
Before we take questions, is there anything you want to add to that, Tim?
Yeah, just thank you, Chair. Obviously, very much welcome the report. It does highlight some areas that need further improvement, and as described, we've had some changes of personnel in that team lately, earlier in this year, which covered the period of reporting. We're actually further strengthening the team just to give board some further assurance. We're putting an assistant director post into this team in the coming months as well, which will help make sure we've got those adequate and appropriate controls and oversights in place. A number of these have actually already fixed as well. So in terms of the documented approval prior to contract award, those have already been corrected, and new awards are now following that required process. So, but happy to take any specific questions members might have about the implementation and application of the actions that are described.
Okay, so are there any questions to Tim or Aaron? Yes, Paul.
Morning, Tim, and Aaron, thank you for the report. Just picking up what's on page, I think it's 124 of the pack. In terms of the overall establishment then, I note the point that we've got a new post added to it. It says there's been a number of vacancies, I think there were 5 that were quoted. What is the establishment of this section that handles bus tended services, please?
Total team is establishment of 9 from memory. I'll go and double check and maybe confirm that in minutes. What we've done is the bus service manager that was previously managing this area, that post has been deleted from the establishment and replaced by the assistant director post that's now in recruitment. There are 2 new roles, one of which is materially relevant to this particular area, which is about contract performance and contract management, so making sure that we've got adequate performance controls in place for contract delivery as well. So that role didn't exist previously, but has been added to the establishment for this financial year, and again we're just in the process of recruiting to that role now.
So if I understood that correctly, we've added, what was it, 3 new posts to the team?
Two new posts. We've taken two FTE added to the team. Yeah.
So
that's 3 the ones deleted.
Fine. Thank you. And so we were saying then that out of a previous establishment of 7, we had 5 vacancies. Is that
We had at one point in time, there were that many vacancies. That's now been corrected because we've recruited backfilled some of those posts as well. But at the time of the report, that was correct, yeah.
Okay, fine. Thanks for the clarification. And then on page, I think it's 125, yeah, 125, where it talks about live contract register. The third bullet point, it says we've got 8 contracts, and in the sample that were taken, there was an annual price of 4.8 million over a 5-year contract. But yet the contract had only been let for £250,000. Is that right? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, so I think...
I'm not sure. Alan wants to clarify what he's describing in that report, perhaps.
Yeah, so I think this is where there was just some of the data quality issues that what had been recorded. We got the contracts, we got the register, and they weren't matching up. So these are just aspects where, you know, for example, the contract needs now updating on the register to make sure the value is what the contract is also saying. So it's more of a, you know, like say, an input error, should we say, as opposed to...
Okay, because it looks that we were spending 20 times what we'd originally agreed.
Yeah,
but that's down to the poor data quality.
Yeah, so it's just a data quality issue in that the register just needed that update. And I think, remembering back to when the audit was being conducted, I feel like the register was a fairly new addition. I think if Tim agrees.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think just to give members assurance, it doesn't mean that we're paying contractors 20 times the price that we agreed with them. This is a data quality issue, not a financial processing issue.
Fine, because my question was, how can you control the budget if you've got that level of error? But thanks for clarifying it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Content? Thank you very much, Tim and Aaron. Thank you. I think now we close the thing. What's it called? Okay, welcome to the second session of this meeting. We're starting a little bit early, and we are not quorum, so we will conclude business as much as we can and ratify it next meeting. It's a fairly meaty agenda, so we'll get on with it, and those who are not here will miss out. It will be available on webcast, so there's no need for anybody to miss anything. So item 18, Mark Cooper. Mark is on. There we are. Hi, Mark.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mark Cooper. I'm the Programme Manager for the transfer of functions, for the PCC transfer of functions to the Mayor. I'm also providing support to the team until a new Executive Director for Policing and Reform has been appointed. So on the 2nd of May, following the mayoral elections, all the Police and Crime Commissioner functions transferred to the South Yorkshire Mayor, and all PCC assets, rights and liabilities transferred to the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority, to SIMCA. As a consequence of that change, the role of PCC was abolished, and the Mayor now exercises the functions of the Police and Crime Commissioner in South Yorkshire. All the staff from the former Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner have now transferred to SIMCA under the TUPE process, which means that their contractual terms and conditions have been protected, and all those staff are now SIMCA employees. A new Policing and Reform Directorate was then set up in SIMCA, and that was created to reflect the Mayor's new powers and responsibilities, as well as his wider ambitions to work across the criminal justice and partnership landscape to enable better outcomes for victims and communities across South Yorkshire. Work to fully integrate the staff who have transferred into SIMCA is ongoing, and discussions are taking place in respect of the accommodation arrangements at Broad Street West, ensuring the IT and security requirements meets the needs of SIMCA and South Yorkshire Police. We're still discussing the alignment of finance, communications and business support functions into the wider SIMCA structure, and ensuring that staff health and well-being needs are identified and met. There are also discussions taking place between Simca and South Yorkshire Police in respect of how contracts, estates and fleet will be overseen and managed now that the transfer has taken place. As a result, the programme board arrangements that we had in place before the transfer have continued to ensure that the integration of staff and functions continues to go as smoothly as possible. Work is also underway on how best to address the Mayor's priorities in advance of developing his policing and crime plan, and that work's in its early stages, and engagement with South Yorkshire Police, partners, victims and communities will take place over the coming months as the plan is developed. Work is also underway to review the arrangements by which the Mayor holds the South Yorkshire Police to account, and a governance review is taking place and will consider the various meetings and briefings that are used to inform the Mayor and support him in his discussions with the Chief Constable. And we actually had our first meeting of the governance review working group with South Yorkshire Police yesterday. So that work's being taken forward jointly with South Yorkshire Police, and that will help the Mayor to ensure that he has the information he needs in order to make proactive and evidence-based decisions whilst placing the least amount of burden on South Yorkshire Police. So I think the integration of functions is going well, and work to develop the police and crime plan has started, and to make sure that we're taking account of the Mayor's priorities and building those into the policing and crime plan. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments? Yes.
I'll just ask one then. In your very helpful report under paragraph 2.2, you list a series of things that are ongoing. Can we have an indication of when you're anticipating those will be completed?
Certainly before Christmas. So we've got new laptops being rolled out to the team over the next couple of weeks. We are hoping within the next 2 to 3 weeks to have the accommodation arrangements finalised and then put in place. Before the transfer, we were looking at moving all staff across to Broad Street West by about early September. That's still the plan, but there's a bit of flex in that because obviously we need to make sure that the accommodation and security arrangements are in place first. But I would say mid-September is what we're aiming for. And then as we've discovered since the transfer, there have just been a number of teething problems with some things like IT not quite working in the way that we would expect it to. So just building in some flexibility around the back end of that, just to make sure all that functionality is working well. We've got alignment of teams. So the Policing and Reform Directorate is most of the OPCC staff that are transferred, but communications staff are working in the Communications Directorate, finance staff are working in the finance team, and business support alongside the business support team. So the team is not quite the same as it was before, and we're on a bit of a journey just to make sure that there's nothing that falls between the different teams, that we're all still aligned. So making sure that works as effectively and smoothly as possible from a policing and crime perspective, but also from a wider Simca perspective is something that we're looking at. But I would anticipate that sort of October, November, certainly before Christmas, that work will have been completed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any further questions or comments? No. Thank you very much for your report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we move on to item 19. Mike.
Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, sorry, Mark.
No, it is me. It is me.
It is you, yes.
Yeah, so the Joint Independent Audit Committee update report is the first of its kind for this committee to see. Following from what Mark's just said in the last piece around PCC integration. By way of a little bit of context, so obviously we have Steve here as the chair from JIAC, and Dave also sits on JIAC as well. Depending on the nature of any questions that colleagues may have, I may have to refer to either of those two gentlemen. Sophie Abbott, who's the Director of Finance for Police and Crime, has drafted this report. As central apologies, she's currently on leave, so I've agreed to cover it. I'll take the report mainly as read, but effectively this just provides a brief summary of the items that were discussed on the 19th of June at the JAC committee. We're only asking for the contents to be noticed. There are no particular recommendations or approvals required as such. And it sets out a number of key areas where the committee gained a reassurance. So around workforce planning, that was covered, priority-based budgeting programme, treasury management outturn position, the internal audit plan, and an update from the external audit progress being some of the key themes, Chair. So I'll pause at this stage and happy to take any questions, and hopefully with Steve and Dave's support we can get through all of those. Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you, Chair. In your report, Mike, 2.3, page 181 of the pack, you talk about concerns about IT governance. Is there an opportunity to address those issues as part of the general improvements in IT that we spoke about earlier in the meeting?
I can give you a really short answer. No. This has been ongoing for, from our perspective, for 4 years. There's a shared service currently between two police forces, and the discussions are as to whether that shared service continues or is dismantled. We've been having regular reports on this, as Dave will attest to as well. But I think there was a decision that was due to be made in around this time as to what the outcome of that was going to be. But currently the police systems are completely separate from the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner systems and SIMCA systems, for pretty obvious reasons, because there's command and control involved in that as well. But the fact that there's a shared service, the reason for the discussion about it is because the two forces have gone in separate directions with the applications that they need, and consequently the service is not what either of them feel is right for them.
So is there an operational risk from that? Is that where the risk arises and why the committee's not happy?
There has been failure. There's been marked improvement over the last year probably, but there has been failure in the systems where officers have been let down by IT equipment.
Right. But you say there's a decision being taken that may move it on.
The reason I smile is because we've been told that a decision's been taken on a number of occasions, and the two chief constables have then asked for further information. The fact that it's a shared service means there's a lot of integrated stuff in there, and disentangling that takes a considerable amount of time and a considerable amount of money. So they're trying to find the best version of a solution to resolve that.
Thank you.
If I can just make one small point, and it might sound like it's semantics, but we seek assurance, not reassurance. So all our assurance is evidence-based.
Sorry, go on. Thanks, Chair. My question's about the savings programme, 30 million over the next 5 years. So I presume that doesn't include police officer numbers and the government targets it is set, but could we confirm exactly what is the savings directed at? Thank you.
It's directed at efficiencies throughout the force. You'll see the naming of the programme here is called priority-based budgeting. So every part of the service is gradually going through a review to find out whether the priorities of the Chief Constable and in fact in future the Mayor are being met, and then the budget is according to that. Under the previous government we were tasked to increase or to provide our part of the 20,000 officer uplift, and in fact South Yorkshire Police have actually gone over and above the numbers that we were expected to have. My opinion at the moment is that there will be no change to police officer numbers that would be detrimental to the organisation. What it has caused is that we've got more inexperienced police on the streets than we've ever had in time. Obviously they go through the whole training, but they don't have the years of experience that that the more mature police officers have got. I'm confident that there will not be a reduction in police officers unless there's a change in government direction.
You outlined the situation with the dual system, the two forces working from one. Who's charged with sorting that out?
It's those tasked with governance, actually. It's the chief constables of both organisations, but there is a team within that report. We've currently got a contract with a supplier that's going through all the options for the two chief constables to make a decision. You'll understand, I don't want to give too much detail away.
No, while we're webcasting, of course not. I'd just like to be reassured, or assured, whichever you would prefer, that it will be sorted out post-haste.
I'm not sure I can answer that, to be honest, Phil, because we've been pushing for 4 years to get an answer to this situation, and it appears to be delayed every single time we meet, and Dave will attest to that. I've done so, as in normal circumstances, we meet quarterly, and we would go from one meeting to the next meeting with not much apparently happening. But I've done some work in the background and gone and met all the various people who are actually working on this to find out what has been going on in the background. It's a really seriously large undertaking to kind of dismantle. I'm hopeful that they will make a decision, a cost-effective decision now, and at our September meeting we'll hear what that decision's been and how they're going to enact it.
Yeah, that's of the utmost importance, I think, and I assume the Mayor will be kept informed and the Mayor will have a view on this.
I would have thought so, yeah. Yeah, okay. Given that the money that pays for all this comes to the police via the Mayor, okay, as it previously was through the PCC.
Okay, well, I'll be meeting the Mayor, I think, next week. I'll check on that. Thank you. Anything further? No. All assured? Thank you very much. And we move on to Ms. Patia. Item 20.
I think we're just waiting on Pat, so you might want to jump forward onto another item and then thank you.
So, item 21, MCA annual accounts.
Thank you, Chair. This item is to present to Audit Committee the 23-24 statement of accounts for the MCA. So it's an opportunity for members to consider and review the accounts and make any comments before they're subject to external audit. So where we're at is that the accounts were published on the 31st of May on the website. So complies with the statutory deadline for publication, and they're currently open to inspection by local electors. And then the intention is that they will then be subject to audit. The start of the audit will take place sometime around about mid-August, hopefully. So that's in terms of where we are. As far as the sort of key issues, just to bring to members' attention for this year, the main event has been the integration of the PTE and the MCA on the 1st of April. So the 23-24 accounts are the first set of accounts for the new integrated company organisation for the MCA and PTE combined. So previously, in 22-23, the PTE and MCA were separate legal entities and therefore produced their own accounts. But in the MCA accounts, we then did a consolidation to bring the two together and combine them. So that has sort of led to sort of three key considerations as to how we present items in the 23-24 accounts. The first of those is how we present the combined organisation and the comparatives for the preceding year. The second is we've had to do some restatement of opening balances on the 1st of April 23. And the third is that we've taken the opportunity to review the classification of certain categories of assets, so public transport infrastructure assets and also investment properties. All of this has been, it's all quite technical, but it's been done by careful consideration of the relevant guidance that we are obliged to follow when preparing the accounts as set out in the Local Authority Accounting Code of Practice and related SIFA guidance. We undertook that all at a fairly early stage, documented the processes, and we shared that with KPMG, so we've had early engagement, so we've given them an opportunity, or we've been able to discuss and share our thinking about whether that's the most appropriate approach. Without sort of labouring the technicalities around the adjustments, that in essence is those are the key changes. They're set out as well in the accounts, in note 1 to the accounts, so that the readers of the accounts understand the thought processes that we've gone through as far as the business combination is concerned. And then in terms of the reclassification of assets, that's all fully disclosed in note 8 to the accounts as well, so it's all made sort of transparent and clear as to the approach that we've adopted. So that's probably as much as I want to say as far as the key issues, but then just open it up to any questions that members may have on the 23-24 accounts.
Thank you for that, Simon. Are there any questions, comments, observations?
I'll come in with an observation, which is well done for getting the accounts done by the end of May. And another observation, I went through these in a little bit of detail, not as much detail as I would have done in my professional career, and sent Simon and Mike and team 7 or 8 questions back, all of which they've fully answered. I'm not going to go through any of these here because we haven't got enough time in our lives to go through detailed accounts questions. But there is a paper chain, and if the external auditors want to see those, just so they've got some evidence that those charged with governance has discharging responsibility to properly review the accounts, I'm very happy for Michael Simon to send that email on to you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the narrative report, please, Gareth. I think you might be the most appropriate to answer. Page 214. Bullet point 5. It says that MCA needs to prepare now for the risks that could arise once decisions are made on future funding, which is likely to come to an end. What stage of these preparations reached? Is the work to start yet, or are we actively considering options?
Sorry, Bob, could you
Yeah, page 214, top of page 214. Yeah. It talks about the end of funding streams. And what we're going to do really when the money runs out.
Is this bullet point 3 a number of other specific amount reserves?
No, I was thinking more about bullet point 5, where it says critically the MCA needs to prepare now for the risks that may arise, subject to future decisions.
So the bullet point 5 is specifically referring to the need for us to plan ahead for risks. Sorry. Bullet point 5 is referring to the need to plan now for risks that we will have to accept if we move towards bus franchise. And so the current way in which we manage the bus network in a way insulates us from some of the direct risk associated with the commercial performance of the network. We don't avoid it altogether because ultimately commercial operators will seek public subsidy for unviable routes. the key change that we would have to accept if we move forward with bus franchising is the immediacy of risk. So in a bus franchising environment, as soon as a service starts to become unviable, starts to lose money, that is our issue. Right now, we often have a really quite prolonged time to consider our response to it, and it's the commercial operator who bears that risk. So it's a significant risk transfer to the public sector and to the MCA. So what I've been doing and what I got approval from the leaders for is to act now, not to prejudge the decision that they'll need around bus franchising, but to act now such that if they do take a decision, they can take that decision having some confidence that we've already started to put the pieces together to manage some of that risk. So the key thing that we've done this year is a significant reserve strategy realignment, and that released around £10 million into what we're calling a bus resilience reserve that gives us a day one financial buffer against any financial shock that would arise from that exposure. And we're working on making that as large a number as possible over the next year. So if we do proceed with franchising, we probably won't get to a franchise network before 2027, so we've got a little bit of time, but this is a multi-year planning effort, and we've started it now.
Thank you very much.
All content?
If I may, Chair, as usual, I'd just like to place on the record my thanks to Simon, Saeed, and the rest of the team within finance for all their efforts to get such a quality piece of documentation together. In the face of a number of headwinds, we were going through obviously a lot of organisational change over Q4 in particular, but we still found the time to get this document together in good shape. So I'm really grateful to Simon and the rest of the team.
Okay, if we're done on that, I think I see Pat on the screen. Hey there, Pat. Good. We can skip back to your report then. So that'll be tram transfer update, item 20, Pat.
Thank you very much, Chair. I have prepared a set of slides really to take you through today, which I'll put on screen just to provide me a backdrop for the narrative. So hopefully colleagues can see the slides around the room right now.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. So thank you for the invitation to provide you with an update on the tram situation, tram transition. I've taken this a little bit broader just to give you a bit more context as well. So just to kind of remind us of the context of the tram system, it is an iconic system really for South Yorkshire, and that has been in operation since 1994, which is particularly important from a policy perspective as well. It supports accessible, high frequency and efficient public transport to a range of opportunities, but also the sustainable low carbon travel opportunities that are provided by the tram system is particularly important also in the light of the air quality management zones that we're seeing in parts of South Yorkshire. It is really also becoming the backbone of the local growth plans that our colleagues in Sheffield and Rotherham have established. It complements the investments that we've recently seen from DLUC, now renamed clearly, in Sheffield City Centre in terms of its regeneration, but also the investment zone and the aspirations for the Rotherham mainline station and the new magnet tram stop that is part of our TCF investment programme. So more recently, the tram system was clearly expanded in 2018 to provide the first UK tram train service that is enabling the tram system to run from on-street onto the heavy rail network. And that was part of a trial to establish the concept of the principles in the UK, and we're essentially the leader in the UK and South Yorkshire to have that facility and a proven concept that is capable of being done. So most recently, in March 2024, after 27 years of private sector operations, the tram operations were successfully transferred into the control of the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority through an arm's length wholly owned subsidiary that is in the MCA's control. So giving you a bit of a flavor, so the transition date itself on the 22nd of March happened seamlessly, and that was absolutely critical. So going from a well-established private sector operating model to a new operating situation under the MCA, a new organization with new processes, systems that all had to be migrated into that new operations was seamless. And I think to some extent, the fact that no one noticed as a customer that transition is absolutely critical, and that is a measure of success in its own right. Systems could have been broken, systems could have been lost, but that they went absolutely seamless. And that point in time, notwithstanding all the efforts that went into achieving that seamless transition on that first day, we also entered immediately a 100-day transition period that made sure that all of those processes and new systems and new operating practices were embedded in the first 100 days. So we gave ourselves a 100-day transition period. So I wanted to share with yourselves the overview of the headlines really of the first 100 days of the transition period. So the key achievements during that time is we introduced on the first day of operations new handheld ticketing machines, which have been a really good success. They were popular with staff and ensuring faster fare collection on board, but also helped to make sure that more revenues were being collected and tickets were being collected. So conductors effectively have been capable of going through the tram more quickly to collect the fares because of the transaction time that was improved. And to date, we've seen ticketing revenues increasing by 4.2% against the budget year to date. So we had a budget forecast clearly, and we're exceeding that budget forecast revenue-wise. Also, from a passenger perspective, and very important, our customers, the retail app that we have established and launched, i.e. how can you buy fares on the tram, now has over 17,000 registered users since we launched it on the first day, and 30% of that revenue, of the overall tram revenue, is now being sold through the app. And before the transition happened, that was only 10%, an estimate of 10% from the information that we had available. We have also been monitoring the customer reaction in terms of the contact center that South Yorkshire MCA provide, and we received about 250 calls relating to tram, and 75% were queries more around journey planning, and only one query was around the changes in ticketing arrangements, because we had to change the available ticket stock to make sure that we were legally compliant. So that is also very important to note, that the customer impact has been very minimal. Also, the customer survey, we launched a survey at the point of transition just to seek opinions from our customers on the tram system. We had 3,800 responses, and it closed at the end of April. And we found that overall satisfaction with the tram is about 56%, but those who said they lived across South Yorkshire, it's 63%. So satisfaction is greater within the county itself. And another measure of customer impact that we started monitoring is to look at social media engagement from passengers, which gives us a net positive score of 86% in terms of engagement that we see through social media. And also people, really, customer service is made up mainly and primarily by the people who provide that customer service to the front line. So part of the areas that we've been looking into post-transition is fare evasion and fraud. There was a sense that there was a significant level of unsold tickets, deliberately or undeliberately, not necessarily intentionally. But now the new ticketing machines allow our conductors to report the number of instances of intentional fare evasion. That's not necessarily the people who walk out of the tram without having been identified. It is those who are actually intentionally and report to evade a fare, and that is at 0.18%. Previously, we've been advised that was 4%, but overall the ticket loss and revenue loss was seen to be as a consequence of inability to go through and see all of the customers who needed to buy a ticket, was estimated to be 20 to 25%. So the 0.18% shouldn't be compared to the 20 to 25% because one is reportable and reported instances of deliberate fare evasion, whereas the other ones is revenue loss. And we believe both factors have significantly improved compared since the transition. And also staff engagement. So there is a staff app really that allows for internal communications, and not everybody has mobile devices or email systems in the tram operations. But before the transition, about 20% of staff participated in the internal communication tool Blink, and now 99% of tram staff have signed up to that, with 88.5% actively participating in that. So it provides a really important communication and feedback channel and sounding channel for the people working for the tramways. Staff turnover also, there was a very high staff turnover. It was around 50% for conductors, which is an average number of leavers of 1 per week in the system. And since the transfer, we've only had 1 individual leaving, and that was related to health matters. Also, our relationships with the trade unions have been really good, and they were content with the way the transfer went and how the conductors are happy with the new handheld ticketing devices as well. Also, we're doing a lot of work on making sure that safety processes and procedures are really, really robust, and the reporting is done, and the processes behind that are really robust. And also, we have started a program of mental well-being for those people affected by incidents on the network for the staff team. So that gives you a flavor of the key achievements really within the 100-day transition period. And from here, we are working on implementing the 2024-25 business plan, which has previously been shared as part of the MCA board papers back in January 2024. So this is not where it stops. Plans continue to be delivered and implemented in accordance with the business plan. So what I wanted to also share is the significant work that has been done really on the tram asset renewal. So you may be aware that the tram assets were built the better part of 30 years ago and are really nearing the end of their design life. And we touched on this at this meeting previously. And it means that a lot of these assets have become obsolete and are no longer, they are beyond their economic life and are wearing essentially. So we have established a case for asset renewal through an outlined business case, which we submitted to the Department for Transport. And we had secured through the CRSCS capital grant allocation £100 million from the Department for Transport to invest in the renewal and the life extension of the tram assets in South Yorkshire. That was £100 million, which has been retained by the Department for Transport, which is part of their process for significant investment. They essentially keep that money in the bank, and the OBC needs to be approved in order for that monies to be released for us to actually invest in South Yorkshire. Although it's ring fenced and secured, the OBC was the release mechanism for that funding. So on the 13th of May, we secured DfT board, IPDC board approval for the tram asset renewal OBC. And that means that in principle, the release of the £100 million from CRSCS has been earmarked for the first phase of tram asset renewals, has been approved by the Department for Transport. It's currently, on the back of the general elections, awaiting ministerial approval, but the monies have essentially been endorsed by the IPDC. This also included an immediate release of £19 million of that £100 million grant allocation for any priority works that we needed to do. And that has resulted in us being enabled to start a program of re-railing works immediately. As essentially within 2 weeks after the approval, we managed to push the go button on that. And during the half-term period, we've seen the first period of embedded rail track renewals. And the photo you see on the screen is showing what happened in Sheffield city centre around the Cathedral tram stop. During this work, we've also made essential that there would be good customer communications and staff visibility to actually minimize the level of disruption experienced by the customers. And in essence, it has attracted very minimal customer comments of a negative nature. So just to give you a bit of forward side of the further program of asset renewal, and because that always just causes a level of disruption to the tram system and to the people using the tram system. So there are further plans for the first phase of this re-railing for 2024. And this slide is essentially setting out what is being done beyond this initial May half-term period. So there's further works designed to fall around the periods of low customer usage to minimize any demand and customer adverse impacts. So there are further works to be done around Gleadlesstown End to Halfway, Sheffield Station to Gleadlesstown End, and Hillsborough to Middlesbrough. Apologies. Also, we have a live TCF program that is due imminently for delivery and design, construction essentially, and that is the Magnet tram stop, which is part of our Transforming Cities Fund projects. And we've been liaising with Network Rail to identify the positions that are needed, because it's essentially the lines over the tram section, the tram train section, need to be isolated for those works to be taking place safely. And Network Rail have proposed a positions plan that again looks at the lowest possible periods of demand over the Saturday nights and the Sunday nights between August to December 2024. This is works not fully confirmed yet. There's some other contractual arrangements that need to be put in place, but there will be further positions to accommodate the future build of building out of our tramways. So looking at a forward plan, and apologies for the little coding, MTR, work package 2, etc. But just to give you a flavor of the areas that the work packages for the asset renewal for the £100 million and future renewals potentially break out as. So there are various different work packages, and clearly there's a key program management function that has been established as part of delivering these works. But there are structures to be looked at, traction power, and traction power is essentially the power stations that actually supply the power to the tram system. The depot of where the fleet is being maintained needs an element of renewal. Then we have systems and communications that also needs updated, because there's mainly obsolescence in terms of technology that has overtaken the existing systems prevailing our tram operations. And there is a fleet life extension program as well. And beyond that, there are further renewals that would be required. So the first to March 2027 is the initial phase of renewals. If there's a second phase of renewals, then that would include customer facilities, further structures work, again, further work on the traction power, further works on the depot and systems, as well as the vehicles, but looking at a fleet replacement at that point in time. So we are also looking at what the tram could bring beyond the existing assets, really, and aligning it really, really closely with the place-based plans that our colleagues in Rotherham and Sheffield are developing. The existing tram system has been in situ really for the better part of 30 years, bar the tram train extension, and that footprint has not changed over time. And people's behaviours and travel patterns have changed over the past 30 years. And what we're looking is at the opportunities that exist, perhaps to optimize the opportunity that we have from tram train, which was only a trial at the time. But is there an opportunity to better integrate heavy and light rail across the region? region, and also to look at alignment with game-changing interventions and investment in the region. For example, around the investment zone and the key trip attractors such as hospitals, employment areas, and rail stations and retail centers. Really, to look at things that really can sustainably grow our system in not only an environmentally sustainable way, but also meets our policy aims locally and regionally, but at the same time is financially sustainable for the region. So we are looking at making sure that we understand the key policy drivers and evidence of the wider impact of light rail, including economic growth, climate change, and air quality. So a lot of work is happening and thinking is happening in this space in terms of it's in its infant stages at this stage. So just to give you an overview of with us as an MCA now in control of the tram operations through a wholly owned arm's length subsidiary. But also with a significant investment program in asset renewal happening and a consideration of the future of the light rail system and the future strategy development. We have established a governance structure, which I'm showing here at the bottom through the virtue of a tram portfolio meeting. So that brings together all of the interdependencies between the actual operations and ongoing CIFTOL, i.e. arm's length operating organization operations, the impact of our asset renewal program on those operations, our clear dependencies, and how that then sits in with a future strategy and development of the tramways going forward. So that is overseen by the Exec Director of Transport. The Exec Director of Transport clearly is a member of our Exec Leadership Board meeting, feeding and clearly reporting into the MCA board. And you see at the top there, the strategic oversight. This neatly feeds into the existing governance structure of the MCA, but just to make sure that there's an alignment across the key tram developments for South Yorkshire, a dedicated program portfolio arrangement has been established now and is working effectively, is being embedded, but is working effectively already. So I'm happy to take at this point, Chair, any questions from colleagues, so I'll stop sharing.
Jolly good. Excuse me. I lost my voice during that.
I've lost my voice, but that's COVID.
Well, I'm just recovering from it, so I know the feeling. Okay, are there any questions? Paul?
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations to everybody on the project team for landing this one. It was one of the big risks that the committee's been monitoring. Is the new management structure within SYFTL fully staffed now, or have we got some appointments still to make, please?
Yeah, so the SYFTL have an established senior management team and is headed up by an MD, interim MD, and we are in the process of recruiting for the permanent MD for that position. So there's an established senior oversight. You may be aware that the MD of the previous operating term left under TUPE, and clearly an interim MD arrangement was put in place as a consequence.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that very helpful report, Pat. Three sort of quick questions of detail. On page 187, you say ticket revenues up by 4%. Is that a price increase or a volume increase? Are we getting more people on the trams, or are we just putting the prices up and getting the same number of customers? I'll ask the other two. Do we understand the satisfaction levels of 56%, which is not that great, is it? What do we do to push it up? Just briefly. And fare evasion at 0.18% sounds quite low to me. Are we missing quite a lot of fare evasion would be my question.
Yeah, number one, thank you. Number one, the breakdown of the fare of the revenue increase, I'll get back to you on that because I need to establish exactly what the breakdown is. But I think it's a mix of the both. There's volume growth as well as revenue fare growth. Secondly, and perhaps Mike or Gareth can revert on this, but otherwise I'll come back to that after the meeting. Secondly, the question was around customer satisfaction. So we are putting in place as part of the business planning process a significant volume of improvements, in particular on the performance, etc. So we are trusting that that is also aimed to improve the customer satisfaction. So those stats are being monitored, the satisfaction with the tramways. And in terms of the fare evasion, the 0.18 is a very low percentage. I don't think it's all the fare evasion. I think it's only the reported fare evasion. So where the conductors actually know that there's an intentional act of fare evasion, they can push a button on their systems that can actually report that. So these are only the reported, those cases detected by the conductors and actively reported by the conductors. So there will be in practice a greater level of fare evasion, which we're seeking to establish through a dedicated survey on the tram system.
I'll just jump in on question one, Dave. It's quite a complicated picture. So it's around what the increase in revenue is down to. I think there are essentially three parts to this. The first is price, and it's worth noting that over the period in which we've just presented, there has been a 10% discount on. So actually the price point is lower than it was for the preceding period. The second point is general footfall, so a number of people actually getting on and off a tram. But the third and the really important one is actually fare capture. So it may be that footfall is exactly the same, but we are capturing more fares because we've got conductors with new machines who actually can get up and down and give a ticket out. So we're struggling to get to the absolute detail of where the increase is coming from. But that we know fares are cheaper right now, and we know that we are, the conductors anecdotally are telling us that they are capturing more fares. So I think it probably lies in the mix of increased fare capture and increased footfall.
Sorry, Chair, can I just add, we touched on the same, well, I touched on the same things at Transport Risk Working Group on Monday with Pat and Tim, where we had a longer discussion, and one of the interesting points that came out was that off-tram revenue, I understand, is higher, that people are tending to buy the tickets before they get on the tram, which is what's creating the free time on the tram itself for the conductors to go down and collect more fares from people who are looking to buy the ticket on the tram. And that's a big shift, I think, in purchasing, from what I understood.
Tim, did you have your hand up?
I did, Chair, but Paul said exactly what I was about to say, which is that there is that significant shift in pre-purchase and allowing more people to be quicker checked on tram, but also, like I say, the ability to collect what is left of on vehicle revenue has shifted. So, but to Gareth's point, there's an awful lot of moving parts in amongst this that still need time to settle and be assessed over time. But so we'll do that through our SIFTL board reporting process as well.
So I know the enhanced job satisfaction figures, presumably from staff. What do you put that down to? The reduced turnover of staff.
I think there's a very close engagement at the moment with the leadership team and the frontline teams. I believe that the transition in zone rights has left the staff perhaps more excited, really. At the end, from my own personal experience in other sectors, is when a contract comes to an end, then clearly there is a level of where does this go next, really, a level of uncertainty. And I think essentially having that closer engagement between the leadership team and the frontline team, I think has driven a lot of engagement. There has been a significant effort in terms of internal investment in internal communication operations, keeping people up to date with the daily affairs of what is going on in the tramways. There's been a real big push on that internally. There's a very open door policy where people can actually come and have conversations. So I think it's that engagement, general engagement, to make sure that people feel part and parcel of the tramways and the future of the tramways and the success of the existing tramways. There's also been a move to a new office accommodation at East Parade in the town centre. The quality of that office accommodation is set to be improved compared to the previous accommodation, so that will have driven engagement as well. So the whole range of factors, I don't think there's a single factor playing a part in this, but there has been a concerted effort to make sure that the people who deliver the customer service on the ground are actually very included, and that they are supported by the leadership team.
That's good to hear, thank you.
Pat, it's probably worth just saying from our own engagement with officers as well within the company that there's genuine enthusiasm for what's next. So what we found is that the staff within the Supertram business are incredibly passionate about running the tram, and now we're very much talking to them about what's next. The £650 million renewal project, the Tram Vision activity that's within the pack that the committee's received today. So this is an exciting time for people who care a lot about the business, and we're investing into it now. So I think that goes a long way to motivating them to do the job they do.
Just one other observation on Dave's point about satisfaction, and I'm jumping ahead to, I think it might be the next one, on the annual travel survey results. In there it says 84% of regular tram users are satisfied, and it looks like it's the casual tram user that doesn't give it a high score, because he only gets 33% there as opposed to 56% overall. So again, there's a nuanced story within there to get to. But I agree with David, on the face of it that sounds really low, but it's possibly not as bad as it seems.
Yeah, possibly those who know it best like it most.
My interpretation of those results, the same thought, was that it's possibly symptomatic of that if the tram doesn't go where you live or you want to go, it doesn't have an awful lot of relevance to you, whereas the bus service has a much broader spread.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And when you look into the survey, there's about, I think it's 40% of people use the tram because it's the most convenient option, which I think is your point, Chair. And that's what drives people's satisfaction. Because if you don't use the tram, you say, "Are you satisfied with it?" No. Take it. Done.
Right. Any further questions? No? Well, thank you very much, Pat, for that very comprehensive report. Thank you. It's like a good time ahead. And thank you, Tim, as well. And we move on to Gareth. Item 22, updated treasury management.
Simon's going to pick up this piece. It's his work. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, the updated treasury management strategy is considered by the Audit Committee, but then has to be formally approved by the MCA. So the next MCA board is the 10th of September, which predates the next meeting of Audit Committee. So if Audit Committee are comfortable, if having had an opportunity to consider it, if willing to provide written representations to say whether you're comfortable in endorsing the recommendations in the report, and then those can be taken forward to the MCA board on the 10th of September so that the updated strategy can be adopted.
I think the difficulty with that is that we're not quorum.
Yeah,
that's fine.
So we can do it.
So
Accept it.
I think Simon's point is if we present to you now, and then if we could ask board members who aren't here today to write in saying whether they endorse or otherwise. That would allow us to go to MCA board in September.
Well, on behalf of the members who aren't here, we do that.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll repeat that. Yes, on behalf of those members who aren't here, I will assume that they are willing to do that. And we'll continue from
Okay.
there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the updated strategy that's presented today is to bring together the strategies for the MCA and for the PCC. So this is a combined strategy for both MCA and the police functions post integration on the 7th of May. The figures that are in there, the indicators, the strategies are essentially unchanged from the strategies that were presented prior to the start of the financial year that have already been adopted. But some of the indicators have been updated so that they now show the actual Treasury management performance for the year in 23-24 as a starting point to look at the trend in 24-25. And we've also refreshed the longer term cash flow forecasts as well as as part of the Q1 budget update on the MCA side, and as a consequence of that we've changed the forward indications as to the level of core balances that we think we'll have in order to be able to invest surplus cash going forward. Which is reflected in these updated indicators. But other than that, it's essentially just bringing the two previous strategies together to combine them to provide the sort of the overall picture now for the integrated organisation. So the report gives us sort of as an introduction just a précis where we are on the overall economic background, and generally speaking nothing really has changed very much from when the original strategies were approved. So the only thing really that's happened is there's been a slight pushing out of the dates on which the Bank of England are expecting the base rate to fall. So at the time the strategy was originally set, the expectation was that the fall in the base rate would be slightly sooner and slightly quicker than what is now being anticipated. But in broad terms, that's still the picture, and that's also the case in terms of borrowing rates as well. So the borrowing position, all of the debt within the PCC and MCA combined is from the Public Works Loan Board, and the indicators are that there will still be a gradual downward drift in those borrowing rates, PWLB borrowing rates, but perhaps not quite at the pace that was anticipated 3 months ago when the original strategy was set. But the overall picture is very much unchanged from what it was when the strategies were first agreed. So in terms of bringing the two strategies together, it means that there's an opportunity for us to look at how we manage the overall position for the two halves of the organisation together, to get the best sort of synergies, best effect for both halves of the business. So we're in sort of quite markedly different positions in that the MCA is cash rich, it's got very substantial investment balances which it's able to invest. Whereas on the police side, the police have got relatively little in the way of investments, and they're in a position where they anticipate in the next 12 months or so they probably would be in a borrowing position, and their capital programme over the next 3 years or so is contingent on borrowing, funding that capital investment. So we're in sort of quite different scenarios for the two different halves of the business. But bringing the two together provides us with an opportunity now to look at how we can manage the overall position to best effect to serve the interests of both halves of the organisation. So, for example, if the police were in a standalone position, they would probably have to go out and borrow externally sooner than they would otherwise have to, which means that they might have to borrow when the interest rates are still a bit higher. Whereas looking at the overall position of the MCA and PCC combined, because we've got substantial cash balances, it may mean that we can come to an internal borrowing arrangement which enables the PCs, which enables us to defer having to go out and take an external borrowing till the borrowing rates fall. So there are opportunities now for us to look at managing the overall position to best effect whilst preserving the interests of the MCA on the one side and the PCC on the other. So it's a bit of a balancing act that needs to be struck. And the only other thing just to mention is that as it stands at the moment, we've still got separate administrative arrangements for the two halves of the organisation in terms of how the treasury management function is being managed. So we, on the MCA side, we've still got our service level agreement with Sheffield City Council to provide us with a treasury function, and they manage the investment portfolio on our behalf on a day-to-day basis. And likewise, on the PCC side, the City of Doncaster Council treasury function manages their treasury on a day-to-day basis as well. So, as we work closer and want to, to have a single treasury management function, we'll be looking at how we can achieve that over, say, the next 12 months or so. So, what we're looking for then is an endorsement of the updated treasury management strategy in terms of the various sections in terms of the treasury management policy, the borrowing strategy, the investment strategy, the updated prudential indicators, which are bringing the two halves of the organisation together. And then with your endorsement, we'd then take that forward to the next meeting of the MCA on the 10th of September so they can formally adopt it. And then we'll be monitoring performance against that updated treasury management strategy, from this point forward. So
just to get a sort of admin arrangements in place, as we're not quorate, will you be writing out, Claire, to the members who aren't here?
Yeah.
If we sort of endorse it now, and then it will finally be endorsed, we hope, and that can be
Yes,
done.
that's right. Yeah, we'll do
ticked.
that.
Okay. Questions, please. I see David's itching.
Yeah, nothing more exciting than a treasury management
Absolutely.
report. But it is important. First one's a comment. I think we've got an opportunity here to look at the way both PCC and here report treasury management and sort of integrate into one reporting style, learning the best bits from each. So that's just a suggestion. Then 2 or 3 questions. MRP policies, are they consistent between the two bodies? And my quick look was they seem to be since 2008, since they're both asset life, but prior to then MCA is working on 2% and PCC is working on 4%. So there's a chance to look and make those consistent potentially rather than have 2 different ones. A question to which I know the answer. We're talking about all this as being one body. I take it we're allowed to combine all the borrowing between the two into one organisation. We don't have to somehow ring fence these as part of the part of the combination. And page 354, there's a discussion about investments in alternative or long-term options, including short-dated bonds, property funds and multi-asset income funds. And there's then a comment that these types of investment can generate a higher rate of return but may create more risk. So we need to understand the risk in that, and we should take appropriate professional advice from external auditors. The minute reports start talking about more risk, my ears start pricking up and I start getting more worried. Is there a mechanism for signing off that additional risk, particularly since some of these things have minimum time horizons of 5 years, and I'm not sure our surplus cash lasts that long, so we might not want to use them. So sorry, I'll stop at that point.
In terms of the taking them in the wrong order, reverse order, so in answer to your third point, it's not something we're actively seeking to pursue at this point in time. It was something that was built into the investment strategy to give us flexibility at a time when the returns that were being earned were extremely low, and therefore, and at that time, the sort of forward forecast were that we were going to be sat on a substantial cash balance, so, you know, have investments available to us for medium to longer term. I suppose the position now has changed in terms of bringing together the two halves of the organisation. So the overall cash position's not as favourable as what it was previously, and we're also getting, with the increases, the increases in the base rate, we're getting very good returns on money market funds and the like now at 5.25% or thereabouts. So I guess the imperative for trying to achieve investments longer term to achieve a decent return is less than what it was at the time that this was built into the investment strategy.
Is there a mechanism for signing off if we do take more risky investments? I'll use air quotes for that. Is there an extra process of check involved in doing that?
If we were going to go down that road, the intention was always to allow Audit Committee to have sight of it prior to us making any decision to go down that road.
I think the key point for us was to put it into this report because board need to actually approve it. But if we were to seek to move away from our relatively conservative approach to how we invest, we'd look to bring it back through committee, and not least because I think we need some cover by sharing our workings about what we were doing.
I think that answered the final one, but I'm not sure we got to the observation or the other two.
Yeah, we possibly might need to. I think that there was a question, Dave, about looking again about how we can bring the two sets of reporting together. So I guess there's an answer to that question, and also just to make a point, we are looking at that. So this is almost the first step. So we consolidate the reporting of what both parts of the business are doing, and then the next stage will be to start drafting out the treasury management strategy for the new financial year in a single template. I think just to speak to another point about efficiency, Simon referenced earlier that the day-to-day treasury management operations of the MCA are managed through Sheffield, and that made loads of sense because it avoided the need for us to stand up a treasury management function. Equally, the treasury management function for the police is managed by Doncaster Council, and again, the same rationale. I think we've got to the point now where we've got critical mass, and we're now in a higher interest rate environment where it's now probably upon us to actually bring this back in-house and manage it ourselves. So we've started the process for that, engaging with Sheffield and Doncaster councils about our intentions, with a view to getting this ready for April next year. So that will be the start of us pulling this together and managing it as one consolidated whole. Can you remind us, Dave, sorry, what was the first?
MRP policies, are they the same between the two organisations? Sorry, that may be a trick question. I don't expect you to necessarily look at that now, but is it worth you just having a look and checking?
Yes, we'll do. I think you're right, Dave, but yes, we'll do.
I think just a couple of points just to round this up as well, and possibly to help with any further questions. I think my reflections are that the overall approach to treasury management between the two bodies is remarkably similar, and it's probably the point that we're all public bodies managing cash and debt portfolios in as prudent a manner possible. So there isn't really an awful lot of difference. So I don't see any giant issues about us consolidating this and adopting one simple treasury management strategy going forward. We are all concerned with ensuring that there is always liquidity, always the money there to pay our bills, and always ensuring that we don't have significant exposure to financial shock through our investment and debt portfolios. The one thing I do think we will need to take more cognizance of moving forward is the underborrow positions between the two organisations. So the MCA has an underborrow position of about £60 million that we had a plan for. The police have an underborrowing position of about £80 million. When you consolidate those two together, and all of a sudden that becomes a bigger number that we've got to be worried about. So I think the part of the focus of the Treasury Management Strategy that we will be working on quite soon for the next financial year is how we manage that position between us. I think that speaks to some of the opportunities Simon's talked about how we use short-term MCA cash balances to potentially bridge through to a lower interest rate environment. But equally, we do need to work with police and crime colleagues about how we tackle their £80 million underborrow position, because we talked earlier about the savings that are required in the police. And if you're moving away from an underborrow position to taking on new loan stock, probably with fixed interest rates, that is a big old chunk of revenue that will start to fall onto budget. So that will be a principal focus for us, and possibly one for the committee to test us on next time that we bring this report back.
Yeah, two things really. One on language. We keep making references to PCC and to police. As far as I know, police don't have a treasury management strategy. It's the PCC. We had the treasury management strategy. Police don't have borrowings.
No, I'm sorry, it's probably our language. When I'm referring to police, I'm referring to police fund. Just for the rest of the committee, and it's a point I should have made, as in a local authority where we'll often have a housing revenue account and a general fund that is all within the single entity, but we are required to treat them slightly differently. Within the arrangements that we have currently, we'll have the MCA's core body of activity and all the funding that is associated with that, but then we'll also have the police fund that under legislation will be protected, and that police fund money cannot be used to support wider MCA funding and so on. So that's my loose language, but when I'm referring to the police, you're entirely right. The assets, the cash, the debts, the investment products all sit with the MCA, as they did the former PCC. But we are thinking very much about this as police fund monies that we will have to treat with a
yeah, it's just the fact that we're being webcasted.
Sure.
I don't want people to get the wrong. The second thing, sorry, thank you, Claire. It's really good of you. That it's like a false hand. Was oversight of treasury management. Currently, Jack does that for the PCC. I thought that it was all coming back into this committee, and I just wondered, because it's still being managed separately, whether Jack will continue to need to have oversight of the police fund.
The intention is that ultimately the Treasury Management Strategy is managed at the group level, so the overview and scrutiny is done at the group level, and by group I mean essentially this body, because ultimately it's the MCA that is carrying all that risk and accountability. I think JIAC still has a role to play in ensuring that the police fund is managed appropriately, and I think that was how we tried to reference this within the terms of reference, but I'm happy to revisit that, and I'm sure it's one of the things that we'll have to iron out as we progress. The development of the 25-26 Treasury Management Strategy is probably the opportunity to do that, and we'll make sure that we're speaking to both committees, but ultimately it'll come here for the endorsement through to the MCA.
Thanks, Jeb. A couple of detailed questions, if I may, please, Simon. Just on page 336. Bottom of that page, it says the overall return on investments for the year was 4.95%. Is that for the PCC?
Yes.
Yeah. And if I've seen further on correctly, I think it's page 353, gives an analysis of where that money's been invested, and the spare cash for the PCC has been invested in call accounts. Is that right?
In a treasury account. In a treasury account and in a 95-day call account, I think.
A 95-day call account.
Yeah.
So does that mean then, looking up on page 336 to the middle of it, where it says the MCA has achieved a weighted average return of 4.58%, some of the MCA's money must be in longer dated investments, 2-3 years, that are getting less than what the current rates are at the moment. Is that?
Yeah, it's so one of the interesting differentiations between how we've managed the cash is that the MCA has quite an interesting spread between longer dated activity, medium dated activity, and then highly liquid money market fund investments. The police fund cash is all within 95-day short-termish call accounts. The reason why our weighted average is lower than the police fund activity is that we invested long dated investments largely with local authorities during the period 2020 through 2022, where the interest rates were quite low. We did that to lock in interest rates at that time. You'll recall base rate was at and around 0. So I think some of our longer dated investments, Simon, are around 2%, and that's what's depressing our longer term weighted average. They'll mature in this financial year. So when we come back again with 25-26, you should see a significant uptick in the weighted average of our investments. We probably invest more longer term because we do have longer term cash, sticky cash associated with our investment program. So we'll get 5-year funding settlements out of government for our capital program. We often get that cash up front, and we know we won't need it until, say, year 5. So we're more inclined to lock that away for longer and try and maximise the yield that we've got. I think the police fund activity is more annual cash flow associated with the police fund grant and the like. So their cash is shorter, so they're putting it in shorter dated instruments.
So the police fund don't get capital grants in the same way as what transport do, and therefore they need to fund it out of revenue through MRP.
Yeah, again, it's my learning curve. There's very little, if any, capital grant received by the police, which is again why they've got some borrowing plans into the future.
Yeah, it's not funded out of revenue. It's the borrowing that actually funds the capital investment in the majority of cases.
Yeah, so the borrowing finances it ultimately MRP funds it in the longer term. Yeah.
Thank you. And then page 344, it created a thought in my mind. You've talked about the insurance provision fund for the PCC. In the middle of that, I think it's 4th paragraph down, Simon. In terms of the tram operations, are SYFTL's numbers in this? And have we had to adjust our insurance fund reserve for the tram operations, bringing those in?
Sorry, Paul, where are you looking?
Page 344. Fourth paragraph down. It talks about there's an insurance provision of £4 million. I think that's for the PCC. Is that right? That's right, thank you. My mind started racing then to the insurance provision we need for the tram operations, and I wondered if we've adjusted that in any way.
So we don't have an insurance provision directly for the tram. Obviously, we do insure it at great cost, actually. It's one of the significant items in SIFTL's budget. We just carry a general reserve for the tram, both capital and revenue.
And so the insurance arrangements for the tram then, do we have a sort of excess, if you like, that we stand to our own account for that?
Yes, I can't recall what excess has been agreed, because there's over half a dozen different insurance policies which roll up to about 1.2 million as an overall premium for the year. But yes, there will be different levels of excess depending on which policy, for anything from business interruption, property, what's it called, PSV insurance, which is where a tram might hit another vehicle on the highway, for instance, and there's also other non-tram vehicles. There's an insurance policy to cover that. So each of those policies has separate excess and other arrangements to it. We do also have a tram resilience reserve, which is in place as an additional buffer, and that, for example, has partly come out of an agreement that we reached with Stagecoach when we handed over the concession. So there's also that additional buffer.
That's fine if we looked at it and we've got it upped accordingly. And final question from me is, could you just remind me what the borrowing and investment dealing limits are for the PCC and MCA? How much can someone go out and deal with without reference to someone else? I'm thinking particularly about Thurrock, where they gave approval to their finance officer to deal in up to 250 million quid at time, which was subsequently breached, allegedly. So what are they for MCA and PCC, please, roughly?
So we've just, in terms of local authority counterparty limits, within the investment strategy, it's set at 50 million. And that applies, so applies to both halves of the organisation. That's 50 million per authority.
Maximum dealing with another...
With an individual authority.
With an individual authority. And then in terms of who can actually do that deal, which an officer, right? What do we have a limit on how much someone can put out in one go?
We do in our treasury management practices document, which isn't part of this pack, but maybe Simon, if we could just clarify that one, because I can't remember it off the top of my head.
Thinking about it, it's perhaps not one for public discussion, but
yeah,
if we can just circulate that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Understand the question, yeah.
Sorry, just one more. It rises out of the discussions we've had so far. We're talking about pooling our sort of cash position and using the fact we've got surplus cash in Simca to reduce borrowing in police and hence reduce their costs. Does that in some way breach the ring fence of police fund being separate to the rest of it? It feels to be a flow of funds across it.
Yeah, it's the right question, I guess, because this is one that we've been batting around, and I think we almost need like an internal protocol, which is similar to when we were in Sheffield. We had one between the HRA and General Fund to ensure that, one, you can keep track on things so you don't get drift that you can't account for, but the second is to ensure that neither side is disadvantaged by the deal. I think where the opportunity lies is often in the margin between borrowing costs and investment costs or investment returns. So in the event that the police had a borrowing requirement, which we know they have, they're 80 million under borrowed, in the event that they ran out of cash to manage that under borrowing position and then under duress had to go to the market to raise it, at the point that the interest rates for borrowing had a margin to the investment returns that the MCA could otherwise get by lending to third parties, that might make sense at that point for us to essentially agree an internal loan within the group to avoid the police paying over the odds. And that's the space, I think, where we can investigate, but we recognise that we will need a protocol. It was probably appropriate when we get to that stage that we bring it back here and Jaya to make sure that the committees are comfortable with what we're proposing.
Sorry. It seems like the opportune moment to recall that we did have a training session on treasury management some time ago, and bearing in mind there are 2 new members and the situation is changing, it seems to be quite a lot. Perhaps we could have another session on treasury management.
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. Yeah, we can arrange something similar again this year.
Yeah, and if we could include in that the substitutes as well, so it will be 8 people. Yeah. Particularly for elected members, I guess other members understand it better than I do. Thank you very much for that. Yes, Paul.
Sorry, just to add to that, Chair, could we expand that to include the police fund and understand the regulations around that as well, which some of us won't.
Yes, I thought we'd do the whole umbrella thing. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. Right, well, thank you very much for that. And we'll move on to results of the Simca annual travel survey. Tim, are you there, Tim?
I am, Chair. Thank
hello,
you.
Tim. Welcome back.
Hello. Thank you. And in the interest of time, Chair, I'll try and keep this as brief as possible, unless people have extensive questions. So you may remember, board requested cited for the results. This is an annual process. It's been going for nearly 20 years. We undertake a survey every year of around about 1,200 people, mixture of online and telephone surveys of both public transport and non-public transport users, and go through a various set of questions asking around their relative satisfaction of public transport. It's already been mentioned in brief, some of the results that have highlighted under 2.1, but satisfaction ranges from between about 60 and 84%, depending on the mode that people use, particularly for people that are regular users of those modes. And there's an understandable and clear correlation between people who have access to a car and are able to use car, and those who don't, and therefore are more reliant or have no alternative in terms of their regular use of public transport to access jobs, employment, training, education, and so forth. The appendix contains all of those results, and I'll not labour or go through any of those in detail, but would be happy to take questions now or at a later date about their findings. I think the only other points to note, and whilst noting that this isn't an approval paper, but just a recommendation, set of recommendations, that the board endorses the need to continue to do this on an annual basis. So we've got benchmark data against which we can measure ourselves on an annual and moving average basis. But also to make sure that we share the information that this report produces, make sure that members of the public are aware of what they say and build plans alongside their feedback to make sure that we deal with and target our interventions and activity, very much focused on that feedback. I think probably just one final point of note, this is going to become increasingly important in my view. Again, very much dependent on where we find ourselves with bus reform and franchising, but not least because of what you've heard about tram as well and the relative control that the MCA has over the operations of public transport more generally. You may have also seen over your lunch break the intention to return under public control rail operations in the King's Speech today. So there will be an ever increasing level of public interest and public control in public transport. And therefore it's important that we use processes such as this to ensure we capture customer feedback. So I'll stop there, but happy to take any questions people might have, Chair.
Thank you very much, and for the bit of information on King's Speech, which I missed, but expected. Are there any questions or comments, observations? Yes, Paul?
Just a comment, really, Tim. I think it's a good survey that you've got, very comprehensive, and in terms of having evidence on which to consider matters at this committee, I think it's a really useful piece of data to be able to keep in the background when we're looking at issues that come up. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Anything further? No. Thank you for your brief but concise report, Tim. Thank you very much.
No problem. I'll stay on for just the next verbal item as well.
As you wish. Paul, you're next. Item 24, Transport Risk Working Group update.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks for staying on this one, Tim. Yes, at the Transport Risk and Work Group on Monday, I think there's probably 3 issues that we looked at. One was the tram, second thing was funding, and the third one was the customer relationship management system replacement, which I mentioned to the committee last month. Just staying with that one and taking them in a different order to what I said. Members will recall perhaps that the customer relationship management system is the IT system which, amongst other things, deals with the issue of passes for the county. Because of changes in, I think it's Microsoft's policy, the software will become out of date in early 2026, so we need to make a replacement. Clearly, in terms of operational risk for the activities of the MCA, this has got a potentially big impact. So what I was going to propose, Chair, with your and other committee members' agreement, was that we have a presentation to the committee at an agenda in the next, possibly we can do it in September, which looks reasonably light, so that we can all understand the project plan, which I know Tim's working on at the moment, what the CRM system does, maybe even throw in some ideas about other things which we could use it for, if that was appropriate. And so ASRC can understand the risks and how we're going to minimise those if people are happy with that proposal.
Right.
Fine. Excellent. So, back
Silence
to
implies assent, I think.
it does.
I saw some nodding heads.
Secondly, second point I want to go back to is the tram. A couple of the main risks that we looked at there were the on the structures side, where previously we've discussed the problem with the bridge at Commercial Street. More work has been done on that, and we've identified that the bridge, when it was constructed in 1991 or whatever, wasn't quite built how it should be. My first question, I think, as probably yours will be, is what recourse do we have to the original contractors? And the answer is probably not much chance. And possibly some of the work might have been done within the public sector. So there's not likely to be much mileage there.
Mixed liability.
Yeah. So there's a lesson there for the future when we do new re-railing and engineering works, to make sure we check that everything's as it should be. The other issue that we've got, which is quite high on the risk register, is the balance anchor weights for the overhead line for the tram. And the good news is there that we're currently looking at doing more work on both the bridge and the anchor weights during the summer engineering works that Pat referred to earlier. And Tim advises that they are in discussion with the contractors. I don't know if anything's happened in the last 48 hours, Tim, that you want to update us on, please.
But pleasingly it has, yes. So just on both of those two items, if I could, Chair. Firstly, on the Commercial Street Bridge, work has now been confirmed and scheduled to commence on the 6th of September, with works to be completed by the 11th of October. So all of that work is now in plan. And to Paul's point, I think it's important that we, learn lessons, albeit lessons that occurred, 30 years ago, as part of the significant asset renewal work that is being scheduled, but also potentially for tram extension work as well. Again, probably not relevant, or not say relevant, but not timely for this conversation now, but perhaps with a future conversation, is about the work we're doing with Sheffield on our enterprise asset management system implementation, and that will, capture and make sure we've got better quality as-built drawings and specifications of assets going forward for both their building but also their maintenance and renewal in due course. On the 10 flex units, work has now been confirmed. Contract was signed actually the day that we spoke, Paul, on Monday. I just haven't got through to me by the point that we spoke. So that work is now scheduled in starting on the 20th of July, so actually this coming weekend, running through till early August. And then there's a short pause and a period of work in October, and that will substantially complete the programme of replacement. So pleasing that work is now scheduled. And as I say, the majority of the blue routes, everything from Sheffield out towards halfway and Herdings Park, will be done by the end of August as well. So it's good to know that the programme is about to recommence at pace. So I shall stop there.
Thank you, Tim. That's good news. And then in terms of funding, two areas which give us some concern, and they are mentioned in the risk monitoring report that we're going to come on to, so I'll not dwell on them here. One is under CRSTS, where both the Park Gate Access Road and the A61 schemes have come under some cost pressures, and those are trying to be managed through value engineering or possibly de-scoping to stay within the funding. And then, just so we all understand on the investment that's required in the tram, which Pat talked about, in a previous item. We've got the £20 million, we've got £100 million agreed in principle as part of a outlined business case, but that's subject to ministerial approval. But the department have released 20 million in advance to cover some of the tram renewal works that are going on in the next couple of next couple of months now. But there's no money in there for doing a complete fleet replacement. It's just dealing with the infrastructure, depots, overhead line, rails, etc. And that's presumably the 650 million, did you mention? That's the 650 million, which I don't know if you've got a time scale for when we'll need to spend that, Gareth, but even if it's within 5 years, we'll need to get our skates on, won't we, to make that happen?
Yeah, so the complete package of tram works is around £650 million, and that was to fall over the CRSTS 1 and CRSTS 2 periods, and that will run up to 2032.
Thank you. So, happy to take any further questions that members might have.
My immediate reaction is that the A61 in Barnsley?
No, I think it's the A61 in Penistone Road. Is it that work, Tim?
If it's the TCF scheme we're talking about, it's the scheme over the roundabout by Asda at just north of the city centre, north of Barnsley town centre. Sorry.
That's the one I meant.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
I might have another conversation with you about that afterwards. Well, yeah, it's causing some dismay, I have to say. Delay would be a further level of dismay.
Happy to have a conversation.
Or rescoping, or whatever you call it, would be of concern to a lot of people, me included.
I don't think the de-scoping would fundamentally put the scheme at risk, Chair. But we're happy to have a conversation probably outside of this in terms of bringing back a level of detail as to what that re-scoping work might look like.
So yeah, I declare an interest, but there are several people who would be in this room who would have also. It's only partly in my ward.
We'll watch that very carefully in TRWG then.
And any further reactions to that? I saw it in the papers. I thought, surely not. However, this is the other man who has an interest. Okay, no further reactions. Thank you very much for your report there, Paul. Most welcome, I'm sure. Claire, next. Item 25.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've got 4.5 minutes to fit in these last few reports, so I'll bash through them. So on the risk management monitoring report, this is item 25. So really quickly, just to highlight at section 3.1 of the cover report, just notes the new and closed risks, corporate level risks. In particular, the new risk around limited insight, that's got a residual score of 16, which is high. The other high scoring risk continues to be the net zero / sustainability climate change risk. And members are just asked to note that there's been an independent review of Simca's approach to net zero and sustainability. And I believe that we've received the outcome of that review and a report at the moment, and over the next few weeks the recommendations from that report will be considered and our response determined. So just wanted to bring attention to those, but I'm happy to take the rest of the report as read in the interest of time, but field any questions if anyone's got any.
Any questions? Paul?
Sorry, one quick one from me. The two new reports that have come along, how have they been identified and why have they come out at this stage, please?
Yeah, I think each cycle I go through a period of activity with each directorate in terms of discussing their risk profile and helping them identify new risks or emerging risks and horizon scanning. And those two risks have come out in conversation and being identified by Claire Monaghan and Kate Miska. There are corresponding actions in the governance improvement plan, and an update that relates to them can be found in there as well. So it's just as we've gone through the cycle and we've highlighted those issues. Do you want to add something, Gareth?
Yeah, I think it's probably reflective of a bit more organisational focus being placed on the internal workings of the organisation and how efficient and effective it is. We've just recruited a new director of Insight, whose job it is essentially to look at all this and to ensure that we've got appropriate corporate performance management practices in. So this is just looking at all the sort of things that you'd ordinarily expect us to do, and it's the inner workings of the engine of the organisation and whether it is purring along effectively. And we're doing that because we've gone through so much change that we recognise that there was bits and pieces being bolted onto the organisation, and it was probably time to take a step back and just say, is the collective whole working as it ought to, or do we need greater focus on this space? And I think we recognise actually, now is the time to do a bit more work on this. And it's also quite important for us to not just to do it because it's the right thing for us to be doing as a management team, but just to reflect that coming down the road is Offlog, which is the Office for Local Government, which will be the new organisation tasked with scrutinising MCAs. And us getting off to a really good start with Offlog is really important for us because it will be one of the key conditions about our readiness to take on more devolution into the future. So I guess some of this has probably always been there, but it's the fact that we're pushing it further up. The scale in terms of how we're looking at this is just a reflection that we're trying to be introspective and just making sure that we're functioning as well as we can.
No, that's very encouraging. As you say, it shows the maturity of the organisation.
Just to add onto that, because there are two risks that deal with limited insight. One is around the corporate performance of the organisation. The other is around insight and using insight to inform our policy making and our decisions. So there are two aspects to it, two risks, and there are two actions in the governance improvement plan that relate to each other.
Having already declared interest, I would like to add that any variation on the A61 scheme would be at serious risk of bringing reputational damage to the authority. I conclude my comments.
A quick question, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but I take it we're still reporting PCC and Simca risk separately, so we're not trying to incorporate those risks in here. And the second one was, I looked at this and then the AGS on page 473 and tried to check that the risks were the same, and then I reminded myself that the AGS is looking backwards and this is looking forwards, so they won't be. So I assume you're happy that they are right.
Yeah, that's right. For the time being, I think obviously JIAC's got an agreed approach at looking at risks within the PCC and the policing directorate. If it's not broke, don't fix it kind of thing. I think you're comfortable with, you've got that assurance, but we will continue to work together with colleagues to look at how we will bring it together and integrate at some point in the future. But for now, I think I'm pretty comfortable that the risks are being managed appropriately, and there's sufficient oversight. And then, yes, you're absolutely right on the other point.
I have to say, I've not seen a risk heat map before like this, and I really like this. So it'd be great when we can bring that across to the police fund as well.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the subject of net zero, it is the biggest, I think, apart from the CRSTS funding, I think it's the biggest risk at 20 that's on the risk register. And as far as I'm aware, within the last year, we've not really discussed that at the committee. If we've had an independent review of our approach to it, Chair, would it be appropriate to bring a report from the relevant director to this committee so that we could look at it, because it is the biggest risk we face, and we need to give it perhaps a review to see how we're going on it.
We did have a report from Ruth before she went and now sits on Barnsley. That's another interest. And the subject of the report was about the impetus from government to monitor and do something about it. The previous government were obviously saying they were interested. It'd be interesting to know how this government feels about that. Yeah, and a report will be useful.
Yeah, we'll be happy to bring that. I think the timeline on all this was that we had an internal audit report undertaken into our net zero activity probably 2 years ago that gave us some hard truths about how we were working in this space. I think we grappled with how we managed that for quite a while, and then commissioned this independent review to help us on with that. I think one of the Mayor's priorities that was in the manifesto and that's been reiterated to us is that climate change is real, and we do have to do something about it. We recognise that we don't have all the levers, we don't have all the tools to manage this, but we can play our part in it. So when the report is concluded and has been received and we've worked out what we're doing with it, I think it would be sensible to bring it back here, and we'll explain how that is going to support the management of the risk that we've kept on this for quite a while.
Thank you. I think that I'd find that useful, because again, back to Transport Risk Working Group on Monday, some of the problems that we've got on the tram system are created by climate change. Increased heat causes problems with the overhead line, and part of the Commercial Street Bridge problem is also exacerbated by increasing temperatures to the metal. So as you say, climate change is real, and then there's the problem of embankments where the tram uses those. So we need to think about those. Thank you.
And they're very good points, because people don't usually see it in those terms. They see it in terms of increased weather, whether it's rain or sun. Yeah, that'd be a very interesting report. Anything further on that? Nope. Okay, I think it's you again, Claire.
Yeah, just really quickly, this is the final annual governance statement. There's been no change to this since the committee last saw it. Since then it's been to the MCA, who endorsed that, and it's included in the draft statement of accounts as well. So nothing further to report, it's just for information for committee that nothing's changed.
And it's you again.
So governance improvement plan, item 27. I'll just take this as read, but obviously if anyone's got any questions on it.
Any questions, observations? Nope. Right, we're on a roll now, Claire. Work plan.
So work plan is included in the pack. I've just noted the addition of a cyber update, CRM update or presentation in September, and potentially net zero sustainability, depending on when that's ready. So unless anyone's got anything else, we'll update the plan. And also we'll restructure the work plan to highlight which items are for endorsement by the committee, and perhaps bring those up front in the agenda.
Claire, can you add in the point about bringing back a report on intercompany or intergroup lending?
Intergroup lending,
Simon will be able to support you with dates on that.
And at some time, probably in the distant future, if you can squeeze it in, training as well. I don't mention that again. Well, not for a while. Yeah, well, and me, and others in the room.
Sorry, Chair. On the question of training, remind me, did we get anywhere with the risk management training, which is?
I'm so glad you asked me that question, Paul. I chased up our insurance broker on Monday. He got back to me just in the nick of time yesterday. He said he would be delighted to have a call or set up a call between me and one of his specialists. So they do. It is one of their services. I can probably say for free that it won't be free to us. What they've asked was whether it would be worth running the session for me to have the conversation with the specialist who would normally provide the training to talk about exactly what our requirements would be. So I'm happy to go ahead and have that conversation, so we've got a plan to bring back to the committee, but preferably to speak to maybe possibly the chair and the vice chair in the run-up to the next meeting, and see whether it will be of benefit to the members.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no issues to report to the committee around breaches of controls this month or this quarter. Thank you.
No issues except the A61 for escalation, unless someone tells me. Okay. I think that brings me to the end of the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Most enjoyable.